Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to yet another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. As of late, these podcasts are brought to you by Ignis Lux Coffee. Talk more about that maybe in the closer. We've got a cool friend today. He is my stunt double with a sweet British accent, much more handsome, international man of mystery, former MMA fighter, real estate tycoon, breaker of hearts. If you weren't married, I'd say wetter of poons, but I can't say that because you're married. Yeah. That'd be like a
Mickey, what a pleasure. You know how to make a middle-aged man blush.
Lawrence Dunning. I haven't even finished introducing you, Lawrence Dunning. And you've actually got some sweet plant life in your office there too.
So this plant behind me, I actually rescued it from my crazy neighbor in my old condo. They kicked her out and they left this little plant. And I was like, oh, I was a bachelor at the time. I could do with a plant for my place. It was about 1 foot tall. Now it's about 8 foot tall. And it's taken over my sunroom. But yeah, it's a lot of memories of this guy.
It Miracle Grow every day for the last couple of years, or what?
Just sunlight, brother. This room is perfect. So we moved to Northwest Indiana, as you know, and this was honestly one of the reasons we moved. Is I'm going to pan the camera around, Mickey. You can see it. It's windows all the way around, and it overlooks the back, the 8 acres of wilderness. So I love just sitting out here and looking out the window and getting a bit of nature.
That's awesome. It's funny when somebody calls 8 acres wilderness. It's not.
Listen,
when you're coming from Chicago.
Yeah, downtown high-rising living. This feels like wilderness, but you're very right. Yeah, there's a town about 5 minutes away, so I'm not too isolated.
So, who is Lawrence Dunning? I met you this past year. My coach, Dan Hart, did a camp in Costa Rica, and you happened to be down there, and you came and trained with us a little bit. You sometimes it seems in life we get kind of like put in a silo because of something we did as a career, or maybe we're known for something. Like you're a politician, you're a lawyer, you're a rock star, you're a barber. Like people know you as a fighter, right?
Well, they used to. So when I came to Chicago, I was a trader. So I came from a company in London, and they sent me all over. I was in Amsterdam, then I was in New York, then they sent me to Chicago. So I was making them a lot of money, and I was 24. And I was like, man, I'm getting a fraction of this money. So my boss, he bought me the book, Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. And I remember reading it. I never even heard of her. And I remember reading that as a 24-year-old. And I was like, man, I got to take risks in life. Why am I working for this company and I'm getting 5% of what I make them? So there was an older trader at the company. He's kind of my mentor. And I said, why don't we start up our own company together? And so I convinced him to leave. And then in my 20s, I did really well in finance. I made a lot of money. But at the time, I fell in love with combat sports. So I was boxing in the Chicago Golden Gloves. I won the Chicago Golden Gloves. I was doing jiu-jitsu. And then I got to 30 and I was like, I was known as kind of, at the time, I guess people would see me as like a rich playboy. You know, I had girlfriends. I would travel with different girls in different places and they'd see me living this great life. But I had this dream, Mickey, of, you know, we only have opportunity once in our life. And I had a dream of fighting professionally. So I took 5 years, I gave away the company. I made every financial mistake you can make. I should have kept my company going because it was making so much money and just, you know, stepped away myself, but I just didn't want anything to do with that life anymore. So I gave the company to one of my employees, and I spent 5 years fighting professionally and traveling and doing cool things like ultra marathons and just doing cool active adventures. And then I got to 35 and I'd pretty much blown through all my money, and the trading environment was no longer there anymore. So I had to figure out what the hell am I going to do now? So I had an early midlife crisis, broke up with my long-term girlfriend, had my last fight. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And luckily, I just had a friend of mine who was an attorney. He hated being an attorney. And he said, I'm going to start a real estate company and you'd kill it in real estate. You have an accent, you have a background in finance. So we started working in real estate together, and that's what I do now.
Did you say one of those pluses was an accent?
Well, Vicky, let me tell you. So having an English accent in America is something that I never appreciated. And so when I was single, I'd go home for Christmas and I'd be out with my friends at the bar, and there'd be a girl there and I'd say, hey, what's up? And she'll say, what's up? And then I'm like, shit, I've actually got to say something. I got so spoiled in Chicago when I would say, oh, hi. And then say, oh, where are you from? And it was just this automatic opener. You know, life was so easy as a young man in America picking up girls. when I went home to England, it was a harsh wake up call. I had to actually put some work in. So so the accent definitely helps. I've had a lot of friends say that it's lucky that I'm smart because it makes me sound smart. So if I wasn't smart, it will be a real letdown for people.
So what was going on that you were so sick of your business that you just gave it away? Did I've been at points in my life where I think I understand. So you're working your ass off, you make all this money, and then this idea or this drive to go be a fighter, was it just so encompassing that it was like a burden to even think about the business stuff?
It's so funny you say that, Mickey, because I actually love my life because I work for myself. And yeah, I didn't like getting up at 6 and getting to work at 7. Kind of sucked. I'm not a morning person, but I really enjoyed the intellectual challenge of trading. I love the guys in the pits. Kind of the two careers that I've had before this latest real estate section was, from martial arts, the camaraderie you have among the team on the mats because you're all, trying to kill each other and choke each other. But then it builds this bunch, this closeness. It was the same with the trading floor. So when you're in a pit of 80 guys, most of them alpha males, type A personalities, we're all fighting each other for trades. But because we're all living that same lifestyle, it brings you so together. It brings this real brotherhood and connection. So I actually really liked what I did. I just realized that, man, I had a lot of money when I turned 30. I remember I never really knew how wealthy I was because it was all just in my trading account. I didn't have an extravagant lifestyle at the time. I didn't have a car. I bought a 1 bedroom condo when I was 24 with my bonus before I left my company. So I had a very simple standard of living. And I knew that if I kept the current trajectory, I thought in my head I'd keep making money. But I just didn't want to be that guy, the middle-aged guy with money and a real big regret. Like, oh, had this opportunity to be a professional fighter, and that was my real passion, and I screwed it up because you and I, we can be making money in our 60s, 70s, 80s, but you know what it's like physically to really pursue combat sports. 35 now they're going a bit older, they're going into their 40s, but for me, I was turning 30. I'm like, man, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it now. So it was just that realization that there's certain times in your life where you have to do something. Like I didn't want to be I'm lucky I'm a bit of an older dad. I don't want to be, like these actors that are having kids in their 70s, like Al Pacino and I don't want to be a new parent in my 70s. I think there's a time and place for everything. So I just realized that was the time to go all in with the combat sports.
Were you already before you got into martial arts? Like, as you said, you did triathlons, and I know you will talk about some of that stuff. Other athletics, were you involved in any type of martial arts before you decided to be a fighter? I know you said boxing, but like as a kid, did you grow up doing that
Yes.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, Mickey, kids today are so spoiled because they have, MMA, like really good technical classes available to them. But, when I grew up, I remember as a young teenager, 13, 14, watching those 80s movies, like the Jean-Claude Van Damme, the Kickboxer and the Bloodsport. And I would see
What's your
those movies
favorite
and
one? What's your favorite one?
I think it's Bloodsport.
Mm.
Bloodsport, the just the it's such a archetype of this strong fighter who's fighting. Not only is he fighting great fighters, but he's also a good character and he's fighting evil and he has to overcome it with just so much character and hardship. But he does, he makes it work. So I'd watch those movies and I'm like, man, I want to be like Jean-Claude Van Damme. I want to lift weights, I want to learn martial arts. But there was nothing. I lived in a suburb of London. There was only one school nearby, and they did Japanese jiu-jitsu, which was kind of more like self-defense, but they had a kickboxing program too. So I was doing kickboxing. And then when I went to college, I remember the first year of college, I was going to all the college martial arts schools, and they were all just like very traditional martial arts schools. They were kind of like, most of the instructors were kind of pussies, and they didn't look like they could handle themselves in a real fight. And then I came across that was all the martial art things within the university. And then there was a little club in the city with like just tough guys. Like it was it was Thai boxing, and the coach had learned some jiu-jitsu. It was like early days of jiu-jitsu, and they would just go at it. And I remember I walk in, it was this like basement gym with weights, and then you go upstairs, and it was like this real rough dojo with holes in the wall and like red marks, which was probably blood. It was really, it was an awesome place. I got so many fun memories. So I joined that gym, and I feel like that I was there for 4 years, 18 to 22, and that made a man out of me because I never competed in those years, but just surviving those classes. When you're 19, 20 years old, I feel like you don't have that adult strength. And I was going to war with guys that were, 30 and 33, 34, bigger than me, stronger than me. So I felt like that was my crucible that developed character. And then when I got to Chicago, I was just so lucky. So I was like, man, Carlson Gracie Sr. had just moved to Chicago from Brazil. He had given up Brazilian top team, and he had started teaching with his son. And I remember seeing the address. I was like 1200 North LaSalle. I'm like, the Chicago Board of Trade where I was working was 400 South LaSalle. I'm like, it's a bus ride up the same street to this amazing gym. So I remember I walked in, and there was a boxing program, and there was a guy, I remember seeing him doing hard sparring in the ring, boxing. And then he gets out, he throws on his gi, and he jumps right into jiu-jitsu class. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So it was so I got into boxing just because the coach there was like, man, you got the jaw of a fighter, you do really well. Like, if you train with me, I promise you'll win the Chicago Golden Gloves. So that's kind of, I did both, but I was working a lot back then, and I didn't have time to do everything all the time. So I would tend to focus around every year doing the Golden Gloves. That was kind of my season. And then in between boxing stuff, I would do a bit of jiu-jitsu, but I just didn't have time to do everything.
Who's your favorite boxer?
I got a couple. I think historically is Gene Tunney. So Gene Tunney, I don't know if you know much about him, but he was a real he was an incredible boxer. I think he only lost, I think it was Harry Greb, this absolute wild fighter. And then he had 5 rematches with him, and he won all the other 5. And as a kid, he watched Jack Dempsey fighting, and he watched him and he studied him, and he said, one day I'm going to beat him for the heavyweight championship of the world. And he did. He trained for years. He worked his way up, and then he ended up fighting him. He fought him twice. The first one was a bit of controversy because he got knocked down, and then it was a bit of a long count, but he got up and then he won. And then they had a rematch and he won again. And one of them was at Soldier Field in Chicago. So I used to live right by Soldier Field. I used to run. I used to think about him all the time. But I really loved him because he was a success. He was a heavyweight champion of the world. But then after he beat Jack Dempsey twice, he was like, I'm done. He was rich and famous, and he didn't want to keep going till he was broken and beaten. So he walked away, and he was never loved by the people. Kind of like when Larry Holmes beat Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali was so loved, they didn't like Larry Holmes for beating him. And it was the same for when Jack Dempsey was the typical kind of the Mike Tyson of the day, just this real tough fighter that everyone loved him. And then he was beaten twice by this guy who they thought was a bit uppity. He would quote literature, and he was like a bit of an intellectual. And then he retired. So he was never liked. But if you look at his life, he had, I think one of his sons became a senator. He had a career on Wall Street afterwards. He would ride the train incognito and just go to work. And so he had a happy marriage. So he had a very successful life outside boxing, and he got from what he wanted from boxing. So he's my historic favorite. Sorry, that's a long answer. The modern day, I love Roberto Duran. I love the way he fought, and I loved his personality. He was just like the machismo fighter. And I actually was blessed. I got to meet him in Panama, which was awesome. I was there, and he's like, I went into a cab, and he's like, oh, I'll take you to his house. And I'm like, are you sure? I'm just going to knock on his door. And he said, yeah, you can meet him. He loves meeting people. So we went to his house. His brother answered, and he said, listen, it was his birthday yesterday. He's still drinking with his friends. They've been out for 2 days. If you go to this bar, you'll find him. So we went to the bar. Oh, he just left. He's at the bar down the street. Oh, he just left. He's at this other one. So finally we track him down, and he's there with his buddies. He's not even drunk. He's just kind of sipping on a beer, and he's just hanging out. And we were chatting, and I just had one of my MMA fights, and I had a big scar on my nose. And so we're talking about MMA and boxing, and he was just the nicest guy. So that was so cool to meet a boxer
cool,
that I'd looked up to.
Sometimes you meet those types of people and they're assholes, and it ruins it.
Exactly, yeah. Because you got to think, if you're famous and you're getting bothered all the time, and people catch you at a bad moment, you can be the nicest guy, but you're going to come across as an asshole. Because maybe you're just trying to have dinner with your wife, and you got some 50 people bothering you for photos. You're like, Jesus Christ, can I just have a moment to myself? So yeah, it was really cool that I got him at a quiet moment when he was just kind of with a couple of his buddies, and we spent some time together, and that was a really, really cool time.
You started talking about the 80s stuff, and it made me chuckle. I thought, I didn't want to interrupt you. I thought of some little silly video somebody sent me the other day, and they're like 80s movies training versus today. And it shows like blood sport, like him with like doing the splits, or like him like breaking the coconuts in was that Kickboxer maybe,
Kickboxer,
and then
yeah.
Stallone like running with the log in the forest, and Ivan Drago doing shit. So it shows all these like 80 montage, and then it shows a guy today with like a rubber band, doing like a little isolated movement, and just like this, not, I don't want to say silly, but like super high level, like cerebral, sports physiology kind of shit. And then it like goes back and shows like, some crazy training thing. Guys like punching like a wall and his fists are bloody, and then in the contrast though, maybe we're better off.
What's so funny because back in the day, I know in like the 30s, one of the things the boxers used to do is they chop wood. And if you look at modern gyms today, you'll see people swinging sledgehammers and hitting tires. It's basically the
Sure.
same movement. So I think there's something to going back to simplicity is really, and even back in the day, it was always the champions of antiquity. They were just always running the boxing. So there's lots of running for cardio. And now people do all this other fancy cardio. But a lot of the modern day champions like Floyd Mayweather, he was running every day. So there's something, sometimes we overcomplicate things. And I love the idea of just simplicity, and what works over history probably is still going to work today to some extent.
I was just looking on the internet yesterday. I had a couple extra weight plates laying around. I'm like, I'll grab another bar and I can just set those up and just leave these couple plates on them and use them for like presses and stuff. And then I thought, I'm like, man, I've got like 900 various little apparatuses, and like, what do you really need, right? Like a jump rope and a couple kettlebells and like a chin up bar and the ground, maybe
Yeah.
maybe like a couple of dumbbells or something. But like all that stuff, we just like, oh, if I only had a XYZ machine or this or that. Farmer carries, that's a great one. Like we
Yes.
mimic a dude actually doing work, carrying pails of hay or pails of milk or dirt or whatever the thing is. And it is kind of silly, but we've created a life where we don't have to go chop wood.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like society has become a victim of its success, right? Life is so easy. Now we have to do things that back in the day we did just to survive. We have to do because if we don't, we're just going to sit around and our bodies are going to get absolutely no movement and we're going to be really miserable. So that's so true. I mean, I don't know about you, Mickey, but I feel like the Western civilization kind of peaked somewhere in the, I don't know, maybe 90s or early 2000s. And it seems like historically for centuries, things are getting better. And then now, yes, you still have improvements in technology, but all these other metrics like obesity and depression and suicides and all these negative things, it seems like we're going the wrong way. The trajectory is not looking good for the future. So it is funny that lovely quote about what is it? Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times create
Mhm.
weak men create hard times. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I forgot that author. I commented on that when that book came out, and somebody shared my comment with the author, and he messaged me. I tried to interview him, but I said I agree, but strong men make strong men, weak men choose to be weak men. And
Mm.
I understand his point. I'm not disagreeing with it, but like, you choose. Today I had that injury I told you about when I met you. And so I've been working on like dips and some exercises that were impossible for me 6 months ago because I couldn't do it. And today I was trying to do some crap with a uh, kettlebell, and I was like, wow, I physically, like, my body just doesn't want to do it, where I used to just 6 months ago be able to do this certain movement effortlessly. And I like was pissed off for a second, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna try again. And after a few reps, I was able to isolate it and get some balance. And I was trying to do um, man makers, I was taking like 45-pound dumbbells and doing push-ups and doing the, you know,
Mm.
the press with the kettlebell, and I just couldn't do it. And I got like 5 reps or something, and I was like, all right, five's better than nothing. And not patting myself on the back, I could have just said I can't do it, and then just not do it. Like, I think we choose to be weak.
That's so true. I mean, every day I love it when I read that David Goggins sometimes he has his shoes by the door and he procrastinate for a few hours before he puts them on and runs. And it's the same with me. Like I was just talking to a friend about this, where a lot of people I've had ex-girlfriends in the past. This is probably why they're ex-girlfriends, but they would say things to me like, "Oh, it's okay, it's easy for you." Just because I worked out every day, they assumed it was easy, and that's such a big misconception. Is when you see people, and this is applies to exercise or life in general. It's easy to see success and think it's easy for them because they've done it and you haven't, and that's something that's a constant battle. There's always that inner laziness that we have every day where we have to overcome it. You know, I've got a 3-year-old. Some days he wakes me up early. I was up late the evening before working. I'm tired. My body hurts. My back's sore from jiu-jitsu, and I have a workout that I have scheduled for the day. And there's a big part of it. It's like I'll just do it tomorrow, but you force yourself to do it, and then you keep developing. You keep strengthening that muscle where you just because you know that even if you feel crappy, you know that there's not one time unless you get a really serious injury, I guess. But there's not one time where you don't feel like doing exercise, you do it, and then you regret it. You always feel better after. So I think just remembering that is so good. It's the same with jiu-jitsu. There's days where I drive to the jiu-jitsu gym, I'm parking my car, and I'm like, man, I could do with just putting the seat back and taking a 45-minute cat nap. I'm tired. I'm like, oh, I'll just go. I'll do the technique, and maybe I'll have a roll or two easy. And then I go and end up having like 8 or 9 rolls with, going to war with people. And after I feel amazing, it's like you just got to get there. So I think there's definitely that inner laziness that we have to overcome. Everyone has to do it. It's something that the more you do it, the more you realize that you don't even give yourself a choice, whether you feel like doing it or you don't feel like doing it. If it's on your schedule and you want to do it, you just do it anyway.
Reminds me of something you were talking about a minute ago when you were a teenager at that gym. You said it helped build character. It was kind of a crucible for you. I know myself as a 20-year-old going into a gym like that, I did not have the maturity to deal with that, based on the totality of my own childhood and life experiences. Having guys beat the crap out of me, it didn't make me angry per se, but like it's easy to not show up when you feel like a little bitch when dudes are just smearing you into the floor. And talk about that a little bit, those times growing through that.
Well, Mickey, I'm glad you said that because I want to clarify. I went to my first martial art gym. I walked in, I remember because it was just before I turned 13. So I think it was 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. And I trained there till I was 18. And then I went to college. And that training, there was some hard times where it was always supposed to be, I actually did some kickboxing competitions. It was so ridiculous. It was called semi-contact kickboxing, which lasts about 15 seconds and then it's full contact. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But so I did get some sparring, but that was definitely easier training than I had in college. And I think if I had jumped into hard training first, I would have probably quit too. It took me a long time to build that tenacity. So I think I'm thinking about with my son now, where I want to expose to him the benefits of martial arts. I think martial arts has given me in a roundabout way everything that I love in life. It's given me my confidence, my health, my relationships, so many wonderful things. But if you go too hard too early, it's easy to burn out. And you weren't just, I think what you were talking about, you're also training with professional fighters. My college gym was tough, but technically they weren't on that level, so it wasn't probably as difficult. So I think there's a fine balance between. I think we have to, depending on your character. If I was a parent and I had a really shy introverted kid, I'm not going to throw him into a brutal kids jiu-jitsu class where he's getting strangled and mauled every time and expect him to keep going. I'm going to kind of ease him into it a little bit. So I think there's definitely some truth to what you said. You've got to martial arts, you become calloused and strong over time, but you have to give it time. And if every single session is just a brutal mauling, I mean, you've got to be either a psychopath or not very bright to not stop. Like, you got to have some wins. And what I really like is when George St. Pierre was champion, he was training. He'd always pick out the best training. The best Muay Thai coach, train with the Danaher team for jiu-jitsu. Professional boxing coaches for boxing, one of the best MMA coaches in Faraz Zahabi. They said before the fights, he can't just be having these really competitive rounds with professional athletes. He wants to, so he'd go to his old jiu-jitsu gym, Gracie Barra, and he'd be rolling with a bunch of blue belts. and he'll be just practicing his pure offense, just smashing them, submitting them, reversing them, and just before the fight. So he's getting that winning mentality. And I thought that was so interesting because it's kind of like life, Mickey. If you're surrounded by every single person who's in better shape than you, they're more wealthy than you, they're more motivated than you, they're more driven than you, it's like Jesus Christ, like it's going to be miserable. But if you're surrounded by some people who are kind of a mess and you're trying to help them grow and figure out their problems, you're surrounded with some people that are kindred spirits like you, where you're both doing well and you're striving for things, and then you've got a few people that you look up to that are where you want to be. That's kind of the perfect blend. And it's the same with martial arts. You want to be around some people that you're better than, so you can practice your weaknesses and you can practice your offense. And then you want to be
Beat them
around,
up
you want
is
to be,
what you're saying. I think you're
yes,
saying
of
beat up
course.
guys.
Yeah. Exactly. And then you want to be around people where it's competitive. So you might be able to catch them with something when they make a mistake and they'll do the same to you. And then you want to be around people that are better than you so you can practice your defense and build some character. So I think that you don't want to go in and just get beaten up. And especially as soon as you start talking about boxing, MMA sparring, Thai boxing, when you're getting head trauma, man, we've only got one brain. Like that's the
Yeah.
biggest mistake I made in my career was I came from a boxing background and they were, I mean, I was sparring as an amateur who was fighting 3 2-minute rounds. I would spar sometimes 10 3-minute rounds with rotating partners. It was madness. And my coach, it was the way I did it to develop conditioning and mental strength. I remember I'd get to round 7 or something, and there'd be rotating partners on me. And my coach was like, Lawrence, you want to come out and take a break? Because there was only one ring. So people would either be sparring in the ring, they'd be sparring outside the ring, or they'd be hitting the bag. So the people in the ring was kind of the hardest sparring. And I'm like, no, coach, I'm good. And I remember like barely being able to even say that because I was so tired and I wanted to lie down on the floor and cry. But I would just fake it to myself and fake it to him. And eventually I built the resilience. But that took a long time.
Do you have any long-term issues, vision, anything like that from getting your head knocked?
Mickey, I'm so lucky. I mean, I hope I don't. I remember I got an MRI. The last loss I had, I got stopped in an MMA fight. My worst ever loss was where a very explosive guy and he wrapped a beautiful head kick, shit around the back of my neck, dropped me, and the ref stopped it. And I lost about 5 seconds of my life. And after that, because I think the promotion were paying, I got an MRI. And my friend is a ER doctor, and he looked at it and he said, "You're really lucky. Your brain looks great." Um, but there's a few things I remember when I retired. I was in a very toxic relationship with a girl for about a year, and we tended to bring out the worst in each other. Looking back, it was embarrassing. I was in such I should have walked away a long time ago, but we do silly things. Men are um, barely evolved when it comes to sex sometimes. But anyway, I remember I had a lot of anger, and she definitely pushed the right buttons. But I think a lot of that was it took a long time to. I think some of that was from all the head trauma, to be honest. I had to work on that a lot. And I remember even after that, when I was first dating my wife, we used to get in arguments sometimes. And she said to me, she's a therapist, which is annoying when you're trying to argue with a therapist. She would say things like, Lawrence, I think you're arguing with your ex-girlfriend right now because you're not arguing with me. And I think some of that anger was probably due to the head trauma. But I mean, listen, looking back, I sparred way too hard and I definitely lost a lot of brain cells. But I also did things. I remember when I was fighting, I forced myself to read 2 books a week. And I forced myself. This is when I knew that I was losing brain cells from the head trauma. So I was forcing myself to actually learn and read things and try to mitigate some of the damage. And then after every fight, I would have a month off, absolutely no sparring. And towards the end of my career, I think I figured out the formula and I had a nice little win streak before I retired where I would only do one hard day sparring and then one kind of more technical day sparring. But when I was boxing, I would spar 4 times a week. I was an amateur boxer fighting 3 rounds, sparring probably 30 to 35 rounds a week. I mean, it was madness.
Wow. How's your hands?
How's my hands? They're
Yeah.
a bit of a mess. They're a bit of a mess. I can make fists, but for the longest time, I couldn't even make a fist. They were so jacked up because it's hands from boxing, and then of course jiu-jitsu fingers that you know about. So when I do jiu-jitsu with the gi, a lot of the time I don't actually grab the fabric. I just grab the wrists. So I play a no-gi game because my fingers are so jacked. So I think that's probably yeah, it's such a balance, isn't it, Mickey? Between now we're older and hopefully wiser. You look back and you're like, I don't really have any regrets of all the years that I did with the things that I put my body through, but I would have probably been a little bit smarter. And I try and tell the young guys now, I'm like, listen, I know you're going to war and you're 24 or you're 28, but like you want to be doing this probably when you're in your 40s, because that's when you really need martial arts. When you have a stressful life or you want to take a break from your daily life and your family, and it's you time where you can be with great people, you can get a workout in, you can have wonderful conversations, you get the camaraderie of the gym. But you can't do that in your 40s if you've completely destroyed your body when you're in your 20s. And
Yeah.
there's so many people at that original Carlson Gracie school were phenomenal at jiu-jitsu, traveling around the country, winning these big tournaments. And, their bodies are completely shot. When it comes to necks and backs, they're not going to take the risk, and they just quit jiu-jitsu. So I definitely think there's a fine balance between trying to achieve your athletic potential and trying to enjoy your body for tomorrow. And that's one of the reasons I was so impressed when we were training together is you're a beast, for your weight, you're really strong, you're technical too. But I can tell that, obviously you're saying you've got injuries. I've got injuries too, but it doesn't impact you when you're able to use your body at a very high level for jiu-jitsu, and of course for your tactical gun stuff too. You're able to use it really well. And there's a sad thing with jiu-jitsu is a lot of people, when they get to our age, if they started young, they've kind of broken their body.
I appreciate you saying that. I'll send the check that I promised for that compliment. But yeah, it's challenging at times, right? Like this past year has been very humbling for me. Um, in jujitsu, when somebody says you're strong, as you know, that's often a uh, insult of sorts. Like, God dang, you're strong, because it means that you're probably just using raw strength and not uh, technique. And everybody always says I'm strong, so it's like just like this big goober that doesn't know how to do anything, and that gets you far though when you don't have technique. And now having this injury, like there was a point I couldn't pick a bar of soap up. People that listen to me been hearing me talk about this, and I'm not bitching about it, but man, it'd be like being stuck in side control. Like if my injured side was either against the mat or against the opponent, I couldn't do anything with it. So it's just like, all right, I have to like figure out how to use the other 75% of my meat and bones to do something. And actually, thank you so very much. Staff is here. Oh, you don't have staff bringing you coffee?
Well, Mickey, can I just jump in? So I want to correct that, because I know a lot of people kind of use that as a veiled insult when they say, "Oh, you're really strong," meaning ergo you're using your strength. But I've got technique, but I couldn't do it because you're too strong. But I think that's horseshit. I think when it comes to combat sports,
I was just saying like
physicality.
that oftentimes people are like, dude, that guy was so strong. And
Yeah,
I was just
and
doing
they mean it
something.
like an insult.
I was just doing something the other day with a guy that did not have much technique, but he is a beast. He probably can. I bet he can bench press 400 pounds, no problem. And he was just like bear hugging me, and I'm trying to get out, and just his raw brute strength, like kind of overcame most technique that I had to throw at it.
But Mickey, I think that's a good lesson for people. Is when I first started boxing, I was 23 when I had my first amateur fight, and it was crazy because I'm a young kid. And I go to this, it was before the Golden Gloves. My coach's like, "Why don't we have a warm up fight? It's in this gentleman's club on the north side of the city." I've never been to like one of these private gentleman clubs before.
Is
And
this like
actually,
something like in a movie where dudes are betting, where a bunch of young fighters are beating
yes,
the shit out of each other?
well, kind of. But I actually boxed on a few of those gentlemen's clubs. But this one was having like sex shows in between the fights. So literally, I'm about to walk out for my fight, and then they're like, hang on, Lawrence, give us 5 minutes. And then these two girls get out, get naked in the ring and start doing things to each other. And my coach is like, "Dear Lord," he's like, "Lawrence, turn around. Don't look at this. You're going to lose your focus." He was like losing his mind. He was hilarious. So, where was I going with this? So
I don't
that
know.
first
You just
boxing
keep
fight,
bringing up
yes.
old girlfriends and sex shows, and
Oh, no, but Mickey, that fight, I remember, I got tired. And I thought I won the first 2 rounds, and I lost the third. And those silly club fights didn't mean anything. It wasn't official or anything. But I think they gave the other guy the decision. But I remember I left that fight with a great lesson that I never lost, and that was conditioning is everything. And it's not just jujitsu and strength, but it's conditioning in combat sports. And so many times the guy can be the much more technically proficient fighter, but if he doesn't have the conditioning, he can win the first couple of rounds, but if he fades in the third, he's going to get stopped. And so I think I used that strategy to win the Golden Gloves. I was insistent on my conditioning. My boxing at the time was pretty rudimentary, but I used to do the most insane conditioning workouts. I put the treadmill on sprint I would do 2-minute rounds of sprints. and I would do 4 of those. And I remember just dreading those workouts because I wanted to quit after 2. They were just so hard. So I upgraded my engine to be able to outperform these people. So I think it's a good lesson for people who, there's some people that do jiu-jitsu, they're pretty skilled at jiu-jitsu, but if you're not doing the conditioning side of it, I think it's so important to lift weights for jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is going to, and all combat sports, boxing too, you're going to overdevelop certain muscles, and then that's going to lead to imbalances to the body, and then that's going to lead to injuries. So a lot of the lifting that I do now, and in my 40s, like I've been really dedicated. I was having a lot of low back issues, and now on Mondays after jiu-jitsu, I just do 5 sets of 5 deadlifts, and the last 2 are pretty heavy and pretty hard for me. And ever since then, my low back issues have gone. So it's that fine blend between, you don't want to become a bodybuilder and lift so much so your body's broken down. Every time you roll, you get injured. But if you just do jiu-jitsu all the time and nothing else, I think you're gonna have a lifetime of injuries. So it's trying to develop that mix.
I've got a friend that was a professional bodybuilder, and I just talked to him recently, and he is now probably 45. He's doing everything he can to try to salvage his body because he destroyed it, using illegal supplementation, which he'll tell you anybody at that level does,
Yes.
trashing joints, things like cortisone shots and shit like that to be able to keep going through injury. And like the quest for whatever that was for him, this perfect looking body. Now he's like basically walks around like an old man. And that, you see that stuff so much, especially the jiu-jitsu stuff. You see a lot of guys that I was just talking about this morning. I miss line drills. Like Dan took them out at the gym. I don't miss them, but I miss them because you're like a kid, doing back rolls and forward rolls and shrimps. You're doing things like a kid does out in the backyard, and it keeps you pretty dang mobile. Like you go hang out with all your old buddies from the trading floor and say like, hey, do forward somersaults across this gymnasium and then do backward somersaults across and show them how to shrimp. They're going to probably be like, nah, like, I'm going to tear the seat of my pants out, even just trying to get down to the floor to do it.
Well, there's one. Are you familiar with the jiu-jitsu instructor Nick Gregorades? He used to run the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood. No, okay. He's become a good friend of mine. I used to listen to his stuff back. He was one of the first kind of jiu-jitsu guys who was like writing about jiu-jitsu. He had a podcast. He was actually on an early Joe Rogan podcast back in the day. That's how old, of an OG is. But one thing I remember reading his early stuff, and he talked about the idea of lifting weights to protect your body and think with longevity. And I've stayed in touch with him. He's been in jiu-jitsu for so long now. It's like a 4th degree, I think, or 5th degree. And he's in his mid 40s. It's kind of similar age to us. And he talks a lot about when he leaves the mats now, his only thought when he goes to the gym, his only thought is not, am I going to push myself? Am I going to beat this guy? Am I not going to get submitted by this guy? His only thought is, when I'm done training, I want to walk off the mats and be able to come back in a couple of days. Like, I don't want he's always thinking body first because he wants to do it a long time. And he talks a lot about what are your reasons for coming to the mat? So for me, when I started, Mickey, I was a boxer who wanted to do MMA, and I sucked at grappling. So I was like, I've got to jiu-jitsu, so if I do, I don't get submitted. And then throughout my journey, by my last couple of MMA fights, I was like, man, why am I going to trade punches with 4-ounce gloves with a professional fighter? Maybe I'm the more accomplished striker, but if he catches me, like that one fighter told you, explosive guy catches you with a big shot, you're going to lose that battle. So the last few fights, I was like, man, I'm going to use jiu-jitsu and make life easy. Then I retired from fighting, but I was competing in jiu-jitsu. So I was training in jiu-jitsu to be a jiu-jitsu competitor. And then more recently, I feel like I go to the gym. I retired a year ago from competing. I go to the gym now as my sanctuary. I take a break from my life and stresses. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm with my friends. I get a workout in, and I enjoy it. But I heard a reason to train from somebody the other day that I never even thought about before. And it said, what happens if you go just because it's fun and it's adult play? It doesn't have to be a reprieve from your stressful life or your family. It doesn't have to be something that you ever want to compete at or even get good at. It's something it's adult play and you enjoy it. And that's the only reason you need. And I love that. I'm like, man, why are we always putting these labels on like, oh, we got to train for this? Or listen, there's some people that are natural competitors. There's women that train, maybe they just wanted the confidence, maybe they were abused in the past. And I love seeing, you see these with female students, you see them come out of their shell and you see them walk straighter and they have more confidence. I love seeing that. But maybe it's just because you enjoy it and there's no other reason that you need for it. And I think that's I never thought about that before. And I'm like, man, he's right. So many times we put on labels why we want to do this. And so
For
for
the
those
love of
people
the
that want to have
game.
fun, yeah, exactly. Those guys, they don't have to go for these life and death roles of war and they're fighting for their life. They could just go and kind of roll with their buddies, have a few rolls, and then go about the rest of their day.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting cultural kind of a thing, right? Like Dan is super competitive. You know Dan, and so then you get a couple students that emulate the vibe that their coach is putting out. Of course, he's not injuring anybody or doing anything crazy, but you create a culture where people want to push and drive. Or you go to that MMA level gym where guys are wanting to be on a fight card, and so they're having to train to that level, and they're breaking the noses and arms of training partners. But then the flip side is you go to a place where nobody has any competitiveness and their jujitsu shit and they're playing, but
Yes.
then like a 45-year-old guy like you or me comes in there and can like mop the floor with most of them because they're like not trying to do anything or they've never the training partners are not giving each other enough real life feedback to develop real skills. Like
Yes, exactly.
I'll ask guys, and I'm low level, but I'll ask guys like, "Why are you tapping?" Not like, not like you should be able to take that pain, but like there's nothing happening right now that hurts.
Mm.
Like, why are you tapping? And of course, I don't know, like if some guy's got a weird shoulder or something, like somebody I know, like, dude, nothing's happening to you right now. No, you
Mm.
can breathe. Like, stop freaking out. Like because you have to develop some that tenacity you're talking about where you pushed yourself those extra sparring rounds or on those sprints. You have to do it, otherwise you're not just going to dig from some well of fortitude when you need it. That's, I guess, a pushback to that.
No, you're very right. We've definitely seen the watering down of jiu-jitsu a little bit in some schools because I love to pop into schools when I'm traveling and train it and see what other people are doing. And I've been blessed to train at a lot of different gyms, a lot of different countries. And you do come across some where you're like, okay, this gym is a little bit too far on the side where they're not really pushing each other. And I know exactly what you mean. So I think there's definitely a fine line. You just and talking about not tapping, you just you reminded me of this. There was one Brazilian instructor that was training for a while at one of my gyms, and I think I just got my purple belt at the time. He was a third degree black belt, and his wife was like an 80cc champion. He was kind of a dick when he rolled. He was always real nice to me, but then as soon as we rolled, he liked to try and like kick my ass, And I remember thinking, man, I'm a purple belt. Like you're so much better than me. Your ego shouldn't be tied up with trying to beat me up. But he had this thing where he'd get knee on the belly in the gi, and he would just pull everything up as he drove his knee down. And he kept trying to. I remember a couple of rolls. He kept trying to get me to tap from it, and I'm like, bro, you can kill me, but I'm not going to tap for this. And he was getting so frustrated. And I remember when I finished those rounds, I was like, yeah, fuck you. So yeah, there's definitely that where no, like for me, I've had elbow surgery on both my elbows. If someone I don't have to wait for an elbow to get extended to tap. I'm just gonna yell because I know that's they don't go fully straight. So you got to protect your body. But if it's a choke, I've been put to sleep a few times when I was younger, when I was coming up through the ranks. It's fine. You get put to sleep, a couple of seconds, you wake up, you're like, why is this guy in my bedroom? Oh shit, I just got put to sleep. I'm actually at jujitsu. Oh, and then you go about your day. It's not a big deal. So I think it's learning of your body, learning when you can push it a bit and find your limits. And I think that's great because too many people think their limit is down here, but actually, the limit is much higher, but they never push themselves to even realize where their limits are.
Just to be clear, I am not suggesting anybody should get injured to not submit. I'm just saying people often don't submit themselves to the
Yes.
fear of losing, or you got dickhead training partners that you don't trust them. Are they going to break my arm or hurt me? So that's a whole nother discussion. But uh, so we're talking
Well, on
about like, why do you go to the gym? What was your friend's name that you were talking about
oh
that said
Nick,
it can be this?
yeah, Nick
Yeah.
Nick Gregorides.
That's how I start all training. What's my goal? Why am I here? That's how we start all of our classes. Why are you here? Why'd you come here? And I go, all the stuff you're talking about, fitness and camaraderie and fun and relaxation, all that stuff. But I could go golfing and do that. I could go to the skeet range and do that. I could do a million things. I want something that also is going to help me defend myself in violence and defend my family. So like if I get all the fun and enjoyment out of it, but then I've got this bullshit martial art that was uh, built around this false concept because my training partners didn't actually give me any real input, I've wasted my life or months or years. And yeah, that's the only
I'm
flip
so
side
glad
to
you,
that.
no, no, I'm so glad you said that because there's a big debate in jiu-jitsu. It's like some jiu-jitsu schools do the traditional self-defense, which for me, coming from as a kid doing Japanese jiu-jitsu with like a self-defense base, that was pretty much the same thing. It's like the Gracie combatives, the kind of self-defense aspect. And then the other people are like, listen, if you're just doing regular rolling with tough guys, that's going to be your self-defense. And we just had an incident in my school with one of my training partners, nicest guy, professional IT guy in his early 50s, but he's also 190-pound brown belt and he's tough. And some guy kind of attacked him. He just did a blast double and then got to a restraining position. And then the police came and took the guy and broke it up or whatever. But like that's what I think what you're saying is if you're wasting your time learning an ineffective martial art and then you walk around in it with a black belt, but you really can't defend yourself against a tough guy who's 190 pounds, used to wrestle a bit when he was young, and he's a bricklayer and he's just a tough guy. He's probably gonna wipe the floor with all these traditional martial artists who haven't been exposed to like real tough situations in their training. So I think there's definitely the pendulum shifted so much from when we were young. When I was young, like all the traditional martial arts, you strike them in the groin and then you hit them in the neck. It's like, well, yeah, in theory, but that's you can't practice it because you can injure your training partner. So it's always just in theory. But when it comes down to it, we're always going to fall to the level of our training, right? In a real life situation. So it's going to be that instinctive approach. And that's what I love about boxing is I will say this, Mickey, the Gracies did such a wonderful job of selling jiu-jitsu as this self-defense art. But I've seen a lot of fights when I was younger. I used to love going to nightclubs and dancing to house music. And in those kind of environments, you're always seeing fights late at night. And it was so often you'd see, like I remember when I first started getting into jiu-jitsu, I'd see these positions. Like I remember this one fight where the guy he didn't know any wrestling, but he somehow got the guy down the ground and he's kind of in mount position. He's punching the guy in the face, and the guy on the ground is getting beaten up. His friend comes from behind and just soccer kicks the guy in the face and knocks him out cold on the concrete. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, that's exactly why you don't do jiu-jitsu in a street fight. Jiu-jitsu in a fight is wonderful for many reasons. But I think if you're in close combat and like you don't know if this guy has friends or who else there is, I think the best thing is my favorite punching boxing is the short left hook and just drop them and then look around because you can't. Anytime you're grappling with one person, it's very hard to fight too. We actually had a just at Christmas, we kind of did a silly game when we started sparring the other day. I walk in the gym, I'm running a bit late, I'm trying to get a little warm, and my coach is like, "Okay, we're dividing the class into two. Lawrence over here, the other black belt over there." And he's like dividing everyone up, and then he's like, "Okay, it's a Royal Rumble, all against all." So like I went for the toughest guy on the other team, and as I was going there, I got jumped by three people on the way there because I guess their strategy was to take me out straight away. And I never grappled three people at the same time, but it was tough. It was very tough. One guy ended up pinning my hips, and the other two were stretching my arms out like I was Jesus on the cross. But it took a while for them to get there. But it reminded me it's as soon as you're grappling one person, it's really difficult, and you're engaged with one person. As soon as you get a second attacker, it's really, really difficult. So the special forces in England, this is before jiu-jitsu. There wasn't really jiu-jitsu. Judo is very big in England, and one of their strategies when they're doing hand-to-hand combat, there's no weapons involved, is they love the judo throws because a lot of people are wearing clothing which simulates a judo top, like a jiu-jitsu kimono, and they're just grabbing them, off balancing them, throwing them down on concrete, and that's gonna give them enough time to keep going because they're obviously moving through the area. And I love that approach. Is something I never would have thought about, but for street clothes, the idea of kind of judo style throws, manipulating the body with clothes, and then just putting them down on concrete and moving on with your life. That's actually a very, very effective thing because even me, like the thought of, I think I could probably in a street fight, if I land a good left hook, I can knock somebody out, but I'd probably break a couple of bones in my hand, just like Tyson did when he fought Mitch Green outside a club in the 80s. It's like he went 10 rounds with him in the ring, but in a street fight, he knocked him out with a left hook, but he broke his hand. So I think thinking about just things like that, it's very interesting. I know you do a lot of, I come from more the sport aspect of martial arts, and you do a lot more of the realistic approach. So it's so interesting just thinking about these things. I read a lot of books when I was younger about people's different philosophies in defense, real self-defense situations. And that for me, if I got in a fight now, I think the first thing I would do is just try and grab something for a weapon. That would just be my instinctive thing. But well, why not if it's there? So like it's just very interesting thinking about those kind of approaches.
I just interviewed my friend Mike Darter this past week. Mike's at one point an international level judo guy. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's one of the owners of Oklahoma City Combat Sports, and they've got some top level dudes there, like former UFC guys, Division I wrestlers, like top dudes. Actually, I think Oklahoma State University, one of their wrestling coaches is one of the coaches at the gym, like super good dudes. And he was also, wow. Mike was a federal agent, a SWAT cop, and an undercover dude for years. And he mentioned in the podcast he did not care for jiu-jitsu at all out in the street. He used judo all the time. He tossed guys, knee on belly, get them cuffed up, get their weapon away from them, whatever, or controlled hands. But I think that, I'm low level with this stuff, but I think that's part of the thing that you brought up a moment ago is the watering down of things, because like Henry Akins, he brings up all the time that real traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu has throws. It has some striking in it. I mean, I've been in classes with him where he's teaching some low kicks and kind of like teeps and things like that to make space and create some angles. But we get like super fixated. I was at a class the other day at a gym that I frequent sometimes, but not my home gym. And as the open match started, a guy just like sat down and started doing the butt scoot towards me. And I always just think about in my head, I'm either gonna like go 180 and walk away, or I'm gonna kick you right in the face, right? Or kick your leg.
There's something, especially when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, there was some innate frustration about, especially, when you get to black belt level and you're in the gi, a lot of matches end up being very technical, and you can get caught up in, you can touch hands, you start the match, they do a flying open guard pull, and you get tangled up in the gi, and they got the grips, and you spend the whole match there, and then the referee always gives it to the guy on the bottom because that's jiu-jitsu. And there was something really distasteful about that. Like, I could have probably strategically win matches by pulling guard and getting a sweep and then stalling, but I don't think I ever did it because I didn't want to be that kind of. I always came from the MMA background, which is real life fighting, and I just think that that style of jiu-jitsu, while it can be incredibly effective for competition, I just hate it. Because it really is that ultimately jiu-jitsu is supposed to be a combat art, and all the original guys were doing MMA fights just to prove that their jiu-jitsu worked. They had that philosophy. Whereas now you get the real jiu-jitsu dorks who are very effective, but they play a game, which I just, as an old school guy, I'm not a big fan of. So I can only imagine your distaste when he drops to his butt and he starts scooting towards you.
Well, I guess that's like anything, though. It's a test of an isolated skill set, right? Like, yes. And it's an easy thing in the vacuum of a gym or a competition area and it's not a bad thing. It's like a rock climber that only goes to a rock climbing gym with a fake wall. Like, yes, he's got skill or she's got skill, but that's not a granite face with moss growing on it. There's not bird poop on it. There's not, water seeping out of a rock and all that shit. So it's like, yeah, you've got upper body strength, and you understand that these different color man-made handholds mean different things. I don't know anything about it. My brother is a rock climber, but like, it doesn't mean that you can now go to Yosemite Valley and climb the big wall there, climb Half Dome or one of those faces because you kick ass at the strip mall gym. And that's like, I think it's just like there's nothing wrong with it if you recognize it.
Well, Mickey, what about, so when it comes to, it's so funny. So I've had a lifetime martial arts. I've done, I don't know, 7 or 8 tactical shooting courses. So I've, I've shot thousands of rounds through my pistols. But
are you interviewing me now? Is that what this is? Are
Yeah,
you not
well,
doing the same thing?
well, I wanted to ask you, Vicky, about the mindset. So I still, the idea of like when I first go, say I go to the range, the first couple of rounds, I'm still like, I'm from England. So for me, even just having a couple of handguns, like my friends, like, the police in England don't even have guns. So it's something that I revere the power of a pistol and what they can do. And when I go to the range, the first few rounds I'm shooting, I'm always like, man, it takes me a while to get warm. And then I kind of get a bit more familiar with it. But what is some of the things that people should think about if you're carrying for self-protection? I just think that I don't know if you just have to shoot it a lot or you have to work on your mindset. But just if I got attacked physically and I have to say I have to use my boxing, I'm so comfy with it. It wouldn't be a second thought. It will be
Sure,
a
because
left
you
hook to the
can
chin
you
probably straight away.
condition yourself. You don't have to
Yes,
think about footwork and all that business, about
right.
angles, and you've done it so many thousands of hours. It's subconscious, just like driving your car. So it's the same thing. You just don't have enough exposure with the gun. I
Gotcha. So
think super simple. Same gun, same holster, same body position, so that you don't have to think like, oh, is it in front of me? Is it on the side of me? Similar clothes, so that as you are going out and about for a while until you're comfortable, you've got this. I don't mean the same exact shirt on, but like don't wear a t-shirt one day and like some super skin tight hoodie the next day, and just like try to wear the same clothes and get used to it. And you got to dry practice it. And you got to
Mhm.
dry practice it. And you got to have some metric that's trackable, like target maybe as big as a piece of printer paper 10 yards away, and dry fire how long it should take you to get the gun up and achieve an acceptable sight picture. So maybe 2.5 seconds from concealment. That'd be a
Mhm.
fair number. Can I get the gun up, get a sight picture, and break a dry shot in 2.5 seconds? And you get a shot timer and practice that. And then through repetition and through exposure, it'll become second nature. Just like, I mean, that's kind of the whole thought process of uh, training. Is you learn firearms training, you learn some skills, then you got to go practice it to make it a subconscious effort. But then you got a whole other aspect. Do I run away? Do I have a legal right to use deadly
Mhm.
force against this person? Am I responsible for someone else? Is it better for me just to grab them and leave? Where's my bullet going to go if I miss? Where's my bullet going to go if I hit? Might it pass through this person? There's so many variables to that. You said a minute ago, I'll just look for a weapon. What if you're running on the beach? Like,
Mhm.
are
Yeah.
you going to?
Yeah.
So I think my friend Joe Gupton, who's now gone, Green Beret, he always said our greatest resource is resourcefulness. And people talk about, like, you've heard, like it's another tool in your toolbox.
Mhm.
How many times have you gone to the garage to find a tool and you can't find it because it's buried in or you go digging around in your garage and you're like, shit, I forgot I even had this thing. I bought it. I must have bought this thing to do that project in the bathroom 10 years ago. I forgot I even own it. Or you go buy a tool and you forget, or you buy it and then you find that you already owned one that you forgot you bought, right? So that idea of the tool in the toolbox, I think sometimes bullshit, because I remember, like, I used to practice some striking, and when you do it every day, like turning your hip over as I'm striking the bag or the mitt, that makes good sense. But it's been so long since I've done that if you put mitts up, I bet you'd be yelling at me and like fixing
Mhm.
some body posture and some things like that because I haven't done it. But I could fool myself and say, oh, I've got some striking because I spent years doing it. But now that stuff's rusty and dull. So
I think
it's a
Vicky,
long,
that's something.
it's a,
No, that's really good what you said. It's something that used to depress me when I was younger because it was like I wanted to get something like I wanted to okay get good at boxing, win the Chicago Golden Gloves, tick the box. But skills erode, and that's such a good reminder. And it's kind of depressing, but it's you have to figure out what's important to you in your life and then make sure that whatever it is, you're doing it consistently. Because it's the same with jiu-jitsu. Even just if I take a 2 week break to go on vacation, first session back is normally pretty rough, and sometimes second one too. And that's why since I got to I think probably a purple, I've never taken more than a 2 weeks off. I don't think, because I didn't want that comeback of, it gets so rusty and then you've got to come right back. So it's a really good reminder for people to not think that they've ticked the box and they've got skills that are going to last forever. You have to keep renewing your skills. So I'm really glad you said that. And Mickey, you just called out my biggest problem with shooting is I love the idea of, and I've seen it with quite a few former professional fighters, ex-UFC fighters. They really get into tactical shooting because it's fun. It's a skill they can do, and there's the added aspect of the self-defense aspect with it, because they're probably used to being this stud fighter, and now maybe in their 40s they've got injuries and they don't feel as confident physically, so now they can learn this whole new skill that they can take for the rest of their lives. So I think it's really cool, but it's something that just because I'm busy, I don't prioritize the consistency of it, and that's something that I really, that's one of my future goals is, I can't wait for us to do some training and just being a bit more consistent with the firearms, because what you said is so true. It's exactly what I have to do. The more the dry firing, the thinking about it, the just so it is muscle memory. So I'm not like, oh man, I'm kind of rusty.
And there's only so much time, right?
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends that are special operations guys, and I think it's pretty common that people think like, oh, that he's an Army Ranger. He must be able to like rappel off buildings and shoot guns, or he's a Green Beret. He must know how to like pick locks and like break dudes' necks from behind. And then you talk to him, and the guy goes, well, actually, I was a medical professional. I could shoot a gun pretty well because I had to do that. But for the most part, I was like a doctor. And the other guy's like, I did communications, but I could do some of these other things because I had to. But my job was communication stuff, and like none of us can do that. And a pastry chef isn't the one cooking the steak for a reason. He's making the pastries, and I think like being a specialist, I think is important, but it's kind of like our business life too. You're doing real estate. You're not selling floor cleaning machines. Like you're dealing with real estate. As such, I'm sure all the crap that you're thinking about when you're working is pertaining to buildings and finance and procuring customers and marketing, and like we have to kind of get specific about the stuff too if we want to be good at it.
Definitely. Yeah, that idea, I always tell people, it just in real estate in general, it's like I have these new agents that come to me for advice, and I say, man, you got to find a niche. Do you want to specialize in single family homes in the northern suburbs, or do you want to specialize in downtown Chicago high rises? I specialize in investment properties. So like finding your niche in any business, I think that's the key to success, because it's almost impossible to be excellent at everything, but it's much more attainable to pick one or two things that you want to specialize in and then get real deep excellence in those.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't want to be pigeonholed. They're like, well, I like single family homes in the suburbs, but I like investment properties on the west side, and I like lakefront condos. And yeah. Like, well, that's cool, but you're not going to develop a body of clients around that. It's too diverse. And there's dentists and doctors that make a good living as general practitioners, but usually the specialists are the ones that really develop a specialty and a good income stream.
Well, so for you, you're obviously your specialist is being firearms instructor. So is jujitsu something that you do to incorporate in the training, or is it something as a pure hobby for you just enjoy doing?
Oh no, man. I mean, I really like it. I lied to myself for a long time because I had spent some time doing it as a young man and got injured a little bit and then got busy, and then I'd make excuses not to get back to it. I had started doing striking again with a friend of mine, Aaron, Army combatives guy. He'd won some MMA fights. I think he's a brown belt. He's been, I mean, he should have been a black belt a long time ago, but I think he kind of just quit training from injury. Kind of got back into some striking, doing some boxing and a little Muay Thai, practicing a few days a week for a couple of years. And yeah, I would always challenge students and friends, you guys should go join a jujitsu gym or a good striking gym. You should do that. And I don't know why. Like, I just thought, like, well, I've done this enough. I don't need to go do that anymore. And I came up with excuses of my schedule or being too busy. And Dan actually, I was teaching him some firearm stuff, and he was doing some privates with me. And I realized, man, I really suck at this. I'm not. This is a number of years ago. I'm not very good at this at all. Yeah, compared to some schmo. I don't want to choose. I was going to say shoe salesman, but that could be insulting. Just some schmo that's got no grappling ability. Yeah, I'd probably do just fine. But you get a 20-something-year-old kid with a couple years of high school wrestling under his belt, and you're airborne. All of a sudden, you start to figure it out, and then add to that what we've been talking about. You take enough time away from something, your bridge starts to look like crap. Your shrimp starts to look like you're having a seizure on the floor, and you forget technique. So, for me, it was more holding myself accountable. I can't. There's a lot of in the space that I'm in, the firearms. Firearms are such a it's such an easy thing to go purchase, and now you have this like ultimate tool that mankind has created to cause mass destruction to another human being. And the difference is you could spend your whole life. You could have Mike Tyson and Customato as your boxing coaches. You could have Hickson as your jiu-jitsu coach. You could have the finest doctors at the finest hospitals as your caretakers. And you could train every day and get all the sleep and the best nutrition. And my daughter could kill you across a room. You will never get to use any of that stuff. And so it's a cop out in the sense of I have this thing that's got this ultimate level of power that we can wield. And not only does it give me a greater level of power, but I can extend that power across a parking lot. Now I can take my will and send it across a parking lot to you, and you might not even be bothering me, and I could do it. Except what happens when you meet me in the elevator, or you meet me against the car door, or I did a couple of videos a few summers ago with our friend Todd Fox, who's one of Henry Aiken's old training partners, just a very badass man. And he trains law enforcement officers around the country. He's a private security guy that works with top level musicians and stuff. And I let him bounce me off of cars and freaking slam me into the ground. And we were basically demonstrating how easy it is to not be able to use your weapon and against a trained person. So I had a blue gun or a training knife, and he just kept beating the shit out of me. And of course, I wasn't really trying like full speed, and he wasn't either. But that's the cop out. I have this gun. I'm okay. And so in this space, there's a lot of guys that, and I bring it up all the time. I always say, "But can you see your dick?" And dudes laugh. But I go, like if you look down when you're taking a piss and you can't see your dick, that's a problem. That's a serious problem, because like big picture, why you got a gun? Because you want to protect yourself. Okay, why? Because you don't want to die. Okay, why don't you want to die? Because you like living, because living's cool. Okay, well, why are you a fat fuck then? And why are you not taking care of yourself? And why do you probably have like diabetes or pre-diabetes? And don't get mad at me. I love everybody listening. But like, if we really look at it, and folks could say, fuck you, I want to live however I want to live, and I want to carry a gun. Cool, man, do you. But like, if you're out teaching people, as I was at the time, and starting to get a little pudgy, working in politics, eating a bunch, it's like, that stuff creeps up on you. I had to get pretty serious about it. And that's what I did. So I got back with my friends and started holding myself accountable.
I'm so glad you said that, because it's so true. The firearm is such a powerful tool, and it's such a level playing field, that it's easy to have it and let the other stuff go. But you're right. I remember reading a study when I was a kid, and you might be able to correct me in this, but it was saying if you're within 6 feet of someone and they have a knife, they'll be able to stab you before you can draw your gun for most people. And like you said, you gave the example of what happens if you're on the beach. One of my good friends, shout out to my buddy Brad, he was living in Peru and he got two guys pulled out machetes on him and they robbed him on the beach. And I think he didn't have anything. They took his iPod, I think he was running with at the time, and his running shoes. And I remember he calls me. He's a black belt now, but that was many years ago before he was doing jiu-jitsu. And he was really bummed out. And he's like, man, I feel like a pussy. Should I have fought them? I'm like, bro, there were two guys with machetes. You don't do martial arts. I've spent a lifetime martial arts. At the time, I think I even had done about 10 years of modern unease. So I had my black belt, which is all, knife defense and stuff. I was like, I wouldn't have even, what's the risk? Just give me your shit and keep going on with your life. So there's that aspect of trying to be a hero. But there's so many scenarios where if they attacked him, then he's got to fight for his life and he's not going to have a firearm. Or like you said, the elevator situation or close combat. What you did to me when we finished dinner and you were just messing around and you pinned my hands to my body so I couldn't draw a weapon if I had one. Just little things like that. I think that's always what I looked at. I loved martial arts because I wanted to be that powerful figure like that Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport we were talking about. And I wanted to be in shape and I wanted to have the
Can you do the
confidence.
splits?
No,
The
when I
next
was
time
young,
together, can I tie
brother,
ropes around your legs and pull you into the splits?
when I was a teenager, Vicky, I tried so hard stretching to try and get to a full side split, and I'm naturally very tight, and I never got there. And it was so miserable because some people are just. I had a buddy I used to do Thai boxing with, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "I just tried and I did it, and I've always been able to do it since." And I'm like, "You motherfucker! I spent years trying."
Still practicing. I'm still practicing.
Oh, good. But for me, it was so you get all that, you get the confidence, you get the feeling where when you walk in a room, if shit got down, you can look after yourself. That feeling for me is priceless. But the fact is that hopefully it won't happen because I don't really put myself in those situations. I'm a happily married man. I'm not going out to dangerous places at night and things like that. But if you're ever in that situation, it's nice to know that your martial arts could save your life. And I love what you said about, why do you want to live? You want to live because you like living. So look after your health too. And you see that a lot with older traditional martial artists too, where they just get really out of shape, and it's not good for your health. I'm also like you. I love everybody, and I want people to live how they live. But I think it's a good reminder sometimes, to that why do you want to be in good shape? It's not just so you look good with your shirt off. It's so you're healthy. It's not healthy to carry around all that extra weight. There's so many issues that are going to come from it. And I'm at that age now where I'm in my mid 40s, and I've got people that used to kind of treat their body like shit. And now it seems like the wheels are falling off for some of them. And it's like, man, they're 45. My dad's 75, and he just spent 3 months hiking across the Alps in the south of France. Like he's in great shape because he's very lean. He looks after himself. So it's having him as a role model where he can still do these active things in his 70s and seeing friends who used to kind of not make fun of me, but kind of say, why you bothered doing all this stuff when we were younger? Now seeing them with all these health problems. It's just a good reminder that life is precious and that, the more we look after ourselves, the more fun we're going to have as we get older. And I still want to be active when I'm older and look after myself. So I really appreciate all that stuff, Mickey.
Tell me about your dad.
So he had a very tough childhood. My grandfather came over just before the Second World War from Germany, and my great grandfather was a Holocaust victim just before the war broke out. My great grandma sent my granddad to England. He couldn't speak English. He was like a bitter, angry teenager, and he got married right after the war. He had 4 kids, real tough childhood, and my dad had a real tough childhood. So when I was young, he said, "I just want to give my kids love. I don't want to push them. I just want to give them a nice family unit." So one of the things I always joke around was, I wish he'd pushed me a bit more as a teenager, got me more serious in athletics and pushing myself. But the good thing about it was it all came from me. But his big thing is I think because of if I'm going to psychoanalyze him, I think because he had such a brutal upbringing with his dad, physically and emotionally kind of beating him, that he just loves peace and quiet. So he's always done that where he was a cyclist. He'd go out on 100-mile cycle rides when I was growing up. He'd love just to be active, to windsurf. He was a pilot, so he'd always fly to these lovely places, and he would just have windsurfer boards at all these different places where he'd frequent, and he'd just spend all week just windsurfing by himself. So he loved that solitary aspect. But he's also incredibly disciplined. Like he only eats a couple of times a day. He's like, I'm good. He can go all day without eating. He's made a consistent effort his whole life to look after the vehicle of his body. And now he's enjoying the fruits of it by still being able, he retired pretty young. And since then, I mean, it's crazy, Mickey. When he retired, he spent 2 years, he cycled from London to Sydney. So it was just like this great adventure. He said, I'm a retired pilot. I've seen the world from these lovely 5-star resorts. I want to see the world from, the actual people on the streets. And
How
he
old
had a
was he
tent,
when
he
he did
roughed it.
that?
He was in his mid-50s.
So he went from Europe, took a boat over from UK across the English Channel, and then what? Went all the way down to the tip of Africa.
To Sydney, tip of Australia. Yeah. But I mean,
But but
people
but how did
from,
he get
so he
Europe?
flew across, yeah, he flew across the water. So he did fly across the water, but a lot of people
No,
did
no.
that.
But I'm saying, I was asking though. He went all the way through Africa, or what?
No, oh no, he went through Iran, Afghanistan,
Okay,
that way, Pakistan, so through South Asia.
okay. Wow.
But I mean, people have done that trip, but say they get to the Iranian border and they're having problems with the border, they won't let them in. So they'll just fly across Iran and then keep going. He had problems at borders. He just waited and he figured it out. He went across everywhere. And he said one of them, I mean, he's got some crazy stories. He was in Pakistan. People are so nice. Like when you're a solo guy, you're not a threat. He had a big beard and he's friendly. People would always be, he said sometimes he had to stop. They were trying to always just give him food and just look after him. And he said he spent 3 or 4 days with some drug dealer in Pakistan who took him in, and he kind of wanted a break. And the guy was like showing him his stash of whatever it was, heroin, and then he was taking him out. It's like, do you want to shoot some rocket launchers in the desert? And he's like, okay. And he literally lived that life, Mickey, where he just crazy stories and adventures. And so it was really, really cool. But I mean, he could only do that because he looked after his body. That was physically. I mean, he was cycling a couple hundred miles a day.
Where does he live?
So my
What?
parents live in London, a suburb of London,
Mhm.
but my mom's originally from the south of France. They have a apartment in the south of France. They normally go in the summer. My mom, they hang out for a few weeks. Then my dad, every summer he does one of these big climbs. Like you have the Alps and the Pyrenees, the two big mountain ranges. So he'll always go. He'll do like a 2-3 month trip by himself. That's his piece, And then he'll come back to my mom, and then they'll normally head back to England.
I want to interview your dad.
Me too, Mick. I've been trying to get him on. He's coming here in. They're gonna come in about somewhere like mid-March, and let's try and do a podcast with him. That'll be fun. Because I tell him, I'm like, Dad, like you have the craziest stories, but my dad's, he doesn't do social media or anything. He doesn't. He's not. It's all kind of internal for him. I was like, my son is 3. Like, I want you to share some of these stories, so when he's older, he can listen to these crazy adventures. Because it's not every day that people do these kind of things. So it's really cool. And I'm so blessed, Mickey, because I did some really wonderful things. That we climbed Mount Rainier together. We climbed Kilimanjaro and Mount Meru in Africa together. We've done a lot of cool things just because he's in shape. And I can tell you, I mean, some of those I was doing when I was in my peak MMA conditioning shape. And you got to think an MMA fight is 3 5-minute rounds. It's that explosive conditioning. It's very different from doing 12 hours or sometimes 16 hours, a summit climb on a mountain. Very, very different energy systems. And there were many times where we'd take a little break to get some food and water, and I'm struggling, and my dad's just chatting away, flirting with one of the girls on the hike, one of the young girls there. I'm like, Dad, he's amazing. He has so much energy for that stuff. It's very inspiring. So I'm beyond blessed to have someone, because if they weren't around older people doing cool things in good shape, they don't have that role model. It's almost hard to see the possibilities. Whereas I have that same aspiration where I want to be doing cool things, when I'm in my 60s and 70s with my son when he's older. I want to be healthy and conditioned and have those kind of same aspirations.
So as a kid, you saw your dad making good choices with his body. That was
Exactly. And it was
that
also, I
that
think,
was a model in front of you.
100%. And I mean, he works out a couple of days a week with weights. He'd go running, cycling. So as a kid, we'd run together. He'd have me in the gym doing things. So I grew up thinking that's normal every day to get your workout in. And I think I think now as a new parent, you're trying to think about these things that you want to show your kids, like what is normal, because every family, normal is different things to different families. So I want to
Yeah.
show that it's normal for my son. It's
My
really cool
dad
because we have
drinks
this
a
Facebook
case of
gym
beer
now.
every night.
Right. So then yeah, you see that as normal when you're young. So
Yeah.
I find the most inspiring thing, Mickey, is I've been reading when I was a new parent. I was so clueless. I wasn't around many cousins or kids in general. So I felt like I know nothing about parenting. So I was reading a lot of books and I was kind of trying to figure it out. And the theme that kept coming back is it's not what you say to kids, it's what they see you doing. So if you want to be the best parent, you've got to be your best self. And I'm like, man, that's so fucking inspiring. Like that just inspires me. Like the better I am, the better model I'm going to be for him. So I think it's so cool because my wife's been working out consistently now with him, and his playroom is in the basement, kind of off the gym. So he's out there playing, and he's seeing his parents just working out. Like this is normal now, and I think that's so cool that he's going to grow up seeing that.
I like that. I'm a granddad now, so when my daughter brings the kid over, who's going to be 3 in a few months, from the time she was, oh, I don't know, old enough to hold her head up, 6 months old. I actually made some videos, I think are on Instagram. I take her down onto the wrestling mat in the basement and do push-ups, or, hey, I got rings down there. I'd hang on the rings and do ring work, and she'd be looking at me, just thinking like that. That stuff, it definitely rubs off.
Mm. Nick, isn't it crazy as well? I don't know about you, but when I was young, you know, granddads and people in their 40s and 50s, they were kind of they were just old. And now there's so many people, there's people fighting in the UFC in their 40s. You're the most studly granddad around. I mean, it's really cool. I think this generation, our generation, has redefined aging that, by looking after yourself, and especially, I haven't even got on the TRT and all that pharmaceutical stuff yet. But I think I probably will as I'm older. Just to
For the
keep
record, I'm not
maximizing the
on it, not
physicality
on anything either besides coffee and
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 machismo.
uh, it's
No, but
interesting
it's just really
what you're
cool.
saying right now. I remember, so like I grew up. A couple shout outs to a few friends of mine growing up. The Strobel boys, their dad John Strobel, he's left us now. He was a sheet metal worker, strong, strapping stud of a dude. My uncles, my dad's brothers, my dad was in his 40s, bench pressing hundreds of pounds. My dad had a gym at his office, and so like there'd be guys there, and he'd always be like, who wants to have a weightlifting competition? And he'd always get them to do shoulder presses, because he always said shoulder presses separated the men from the boys. And there would be guys like my dad would have like 150 pounds or something on a bar, and these guys were like, they're not shoulder pressing this, and he'd
Yeah,
be like repping it and laughing at him with a suit and tie on. Or my
that's
dad's
amazing.
my dad's brothers, my mom's brother-in-law, one of my uncles, Bob, who's 70 something years old, and he's a carpenter. Now he's retired, and he donates his time to goes around the world on mission trips building things. But I was just with him the other day, for his mother's funeral. Actually, she was a lovely lady that lived into her 90s, but in his 40s, this dude was a fucking ox, and he still is. So I think there was some dudes like that, but I think you're right. There's like a lot of it's interesting, not to go be long-winded. And one respect, people are like, oh, modern medicine and all of these toxins and pesticides. You hear those people talk about all these bad things, like we're sick, sick, sick. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, you show up in Costa Rica, where you and I just were, there's a lot of gray-haired people that are pretty damn fit, living pretty
Yeah.
damn good lives too. So I think
Hmm.
it's maybe what are we focusing on? So back to you. Cut you
Well,
off.
Mickey, talking about what you just said. So yesterday I got a bunch of like a bunch of tests done, which I try and do every couple of years. And they were looking at I did a bunch of metal tests, and my metals
Hmm.
were pretty good. I don't eat
Like
I don't really like sushi. Like
like
heavy
which
metals,
ones?
like
Like arsenic,
toxins.
cadmium, lead,
Yes.
those ones,
Yeah,
mercury.
exactly. Yeah. So they were all really good, but two were off the charts bad, and we're trying for a kid number two, and it's really bad for fertility. The two were, I think it was the environment. I forget what the name of it, but it's environmental pollutants was really, really high, and the second was my plastics. And I'm like, my plastics, my water bottle is metal. I don't really eat out of too much plastic. I'm like, where am I getting all this plastic from? He said it's really bad. So I guess there's some protocol you do where one of the things I wanted to get for my house, but I kind of ran out of money on the remodel, is a home sauna. And he said, you got to get a home sauna. It's like a 6 week protocol with the saunas and some supplements, and it kind of helps get the plastic out. But so I think there's definitely some truth. Because I like you said, I hear a lot of people talking about that stuff, all the pollutants in the air and all the plastic, that something like we eat a credit card worth of plastic a year, and it's really affecting fertility, and the national fertility is going down. So I guess there's some truth to that too, because I think I'm really healthy. And I'll give myself a shout out. He did some tests with like muscle, bone density, fat, all the ratios, like waist to chest to hip, all these different ratios. And he said, Lawrence, you're about as perfect as you can be for those. I was like, oh, pat myself on the back. And he's like, but your plastics is off the chart bad. I'm like, oh shit. So it's crazy. Even me, who thinks I'm very health conscious. Like if mine are off, like my wife is saying, like, what the hell? Like if yours are bad, what about people that don't give a shit about their health? How bad is theirs? So it kind of sucks that we live in a world, Mickey, where
Microplastic
even if
thing
you're
is
making
kind of crazy.
yes, and even if you're like, I think I make good choices in the food I eat and the lifestyle that I have, but somehow my plastics are off the chart bad. Like that's not good. So that's my next thing is just trying to figure that out. So to work on that, try and get that down.
I'll help you with a sauna. I've built many.
Oh,
Don't
awesome. Thank you
don't
so
don't
much.
buy one. We'll get the components and build one.
Well, Mickey, what do you have knowledge on the difference? Because he recommended one of those infrared saunas, the little ones. I like the
I
traditional
wouldn't
Swedish
trust
ones.
this guy at all. It's all about the heat, man.
The heat, yeah,
It's all
exactly,
about.
yeah.
We'll talk about it offline. I don't want to take it, but yeah,
Awesome.
that we
The heat,
could
that's
buy.
what I thought. The heat.
Yeah, we could. It's. I mean, those. You're literally like cooking your insides with the infrared. That's
Gotcha.
another
Okay.
discussion.
No, I'm
I'll
so
get.
see, I'm so glad you said that, Mickey, because there's certain things where you hear things in podcasts or you're reading things and you kind of have some knowledge, but you're a little hazy on it. And
Yeah.
that was my gut feeling was cooking my insides. That doesn't seem good. I just want the heat in the regular Swedish sauna. So I'm so glad you said that. That was the direction that I was thinking.
Yeah.
But
Those are.
but Mickey, back to this, like we live in a world where I'm very optimistic and I love life and I love my life and I love my friends and I'm so grateful we met. So I don't want to be negative when I say this, but when you start thinking about, I heard you on other podcasts where you talk about it's your duty as you get older to learn about the history of America and the founding fathers and all these different, the Constitution, all these things. And that's why one of the things I really love about you is you're always learning about things. And I'm the same way. But the more layers of the onion you peel back, it does kind of get depressing. So I'm not even going to start on the whole thing with the pedophile conspiracies in Hollywood. Let's just talk about money. The purchasing power of the dollar has just gone down so much, for the last century, specifically since Nixon came off the gold standard. So if you're a good, hardworking person, you put your head down, you put money in the bank, you're basically losing money every year with inflation. And then you look at, the food supply. You go and try and buy healthy food, but there's so much crap and pesticides in there. We're getting taxed out of our ass, and where's the money going to? And it's being sent to fund foreign wars while the inner cities in America are crumbling. Like the more I learn, it's hard not to become. I don't think I'm jaded, but I remember my dad saying it's impossible as you get older not to become cynical because the truth is that when you're young, your parents, a lot of parents in a loving family, they try and shield you from the brutal nature's reality. And then as you get older, the more you learn, you're just like, man, it's corruption all around us. At least in the third world, they're blatant about the corruption. Corruption's here, you pay to play. But in the Western world, it's as if corruption doesn't exist, but it's the lobbyists that seem to be running the show. So it just that this plastics thing kind of pissed me off finding that
Well,
out last night
but
because
then think about from that perspective of those plastics. We choose. There is nothing that has stopped you your whole life from living on that 8 acres instead of a condo. You could have been
yes,
growing your vegetables, and this is like a far extreme. Not every human can live that way, but we go to the store and we buy a chicken chopped up, wrapped in foam and plastic with a little absorbent pad, and I just saw something the other day. It was a couple of climate activists. They were in like Stockholm or somewhere like that. And there was some big famous piece of art, and they went up with hammers and they were smashing the protective glass on the art. And then they had like this little speech they gave about ban petroleum because it's killing the world and blah, blah, blah. I'm not dismissing their argument. It doesn't matter. But I was laughing because they're going to go destroy this piece of art to raise awareness about their concern for the evils of petroleum. All the while, the hammer that they were using, I happen to have one, has a plastic handle, which is made of petroleum.
for sure.
Dude's
Yeah.
got glasses on, like my glasses, that are made of plastic. He has a ball cap on. That ball cap, that brim is made of plastic, which is petroleum. They probably had clothes on, like this is a blended shirt that I'm wearing. This is all there's petroleum in my shorts. There's petroleum in my watch. Like we choose all this. Like, are you gonna like I look at those people and I'm like, go to Holland and get some clogs, some Dutch clogs, or whittle some yourself, or you know what I'm saying,
No,
or get some Jesus sandals made out of a leather. But we choose all that shit.
mm,
Like you walk around a house, and I mean everything from the carpet to the fiberglass mesh that's binding the drywall panels together, the glues that are holding the sheet vinyl down on your kitchen floor, the composite countertops, just I mean, you fucking name it. The plastic handles on your knives, the shitty steel that's in the silverware you put in your mouth. And we choose all that stuff. Nobody made you buy it.
that's so true. It reminds me of the people complaining about capitalism on a $1,500 iPhone. It's very, very true. I know exactly what you mean.
So I own this coffee brand. I'm wearing the shirt. We're just plugging it at the beginning of the thing. And one of the things it bothers me, we use these bags. And so I've been coming up with a series of videos on ways to reuse these. I mean, there's got to be like concessions, I think, where unless you're going to have a coffee roaster at your home and roast your own coffee, or go somewhere like a local brewery, you can go there with your grog and they'll fill your container up and you go home with it. I mean, I can't take a jar, I guess I could, to the local roastery and have them fill my glass jar up. So we need to have containers like that, but like, is there ways we can reuse them? You go to the grocery
Mm.
store, you take all your shit out of all the bags and then all the packaging. I think Amazon, they're getting better at it, but the packaging and just all this stuff that we, for our consumerist lifestyle, I mean, we expose ourselves to all this piss. And this shirt, like I just thought about it, this is half blend of polyester. And there's
Mm.
plastics and all kinds of crap that I'm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, are
it
you
makes
wearing 100% organic flax underwear, or is there rubber? And
I
show us
gotta
your
check.
underwear.
I gotta
Stand
check.
up and show us your
Well,
underwear.
well, Mickey, I'll say this. It's kind of like in the was it 50s when everyone was smoking and they didn't really realize, or maybe some people did, but it wasn't common knowledge how bad cigarettes were for your health. And then, slowly rules came in. They had to be honest with their marketing. And then I remember what was it, about 10 years ago when they banned smoking in public places, which
Yeah,
I'm a
I think it
libertarian
was
at
already
heart.
like 20 years ago, bro.
Oh, it's 20. Geez, I'm showing how old I am. But I remember back in the day when I first moved here to the US, I don't smoke, but you come out of a nightclub and you stink. Your whole clothes, your hair, everything stinks of cigarette smoke. I'm a libertarian at heart, so I'm not a big fan of rules. But I got to say that was a really good rule they made where you ban it in public places. And I just noticed like it just cut down the smoking. They made it hard to smoke. You had to go outside in the street. You're in Chicago in the winter. You got to go outside in the freezing cold to get a cigarette. They're taking the incentives away from smoking. So I wonder now what we're living through. Where is this plastic thing gonna become a big thing in the future, where we just don't use plastic because fertility is gonna keep going down? I feel like we're living in an interesting age, Mickey. Like I don't know, the whole thing with the cell phone towers and the EMF damage, and there's so many things that are so new. We're not really going to know where it's at for the next generation. But I'm just
Sure.
selfishly trying to figure out myself. If we're trying for kid number two, I got to get my fertility up. I don't know what's going on, but it's just it's you're right. We have the choices. We've got to make, but I think we have to make better choices. It's so hard for people to think about all this stuff when they're just trying to balance their checkbook and deal with their piece of shit boss who's screaming at them all day, and then they get home and they got a toddler running around and they're exhausted and they don't have the mental bandwidth to think about these things. But I think we owe it to ourselves to make the time to really try and get some knowledge about what's happening around us. And I don't know about you, Mickey, but I think it's going to be a wild year with this next election. It seems like we're so politically divided the country down the middle. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a little crazy, crazy time.
I think it will be, but I think the reason I enjoy history so much is that I think it's always a crazy time. I mean, like
Mm,
you could pick anywhere in the world, anywhere, and go dig into the history of the place. America is an easy one because the folks listening and us live here. From I've been doing this deep dive into the Tea Party lately, the Boston Tea Party, not the political group. And most people don't know anything about it. They just think a bunch of dudes dumped some tea into the harbor. And they think it had to do with taxation. It had little to do with taxation. It had to do with the a colonist basically drawing a hard line and saying we will self-govern. And taxation was part of the problem, but it had to do with self-governance. And
Yeah.
you look at the shit that went on. I just was at the Antietam, the Civil War battlefield, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the uh, one of the big takeaways when you visit Antietam is it was at one point one of the bloodiest and largest loss of lives in American history for our military. And I think during that battle, a soldier died every second for hours, thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. And we talk about how bad stuff is. I have never, Gettysburg is another place. I have never went walking down the street to go to the market and seen swollen bodies in the sun from, Civil War like that. So like, I think it, talking about this titration, this idea of exposing ourselves through training so that we become more resilient. Maybe that author, the idea of tough times make, end up, it all comes down to weakness. I think we're pussies. That joke about the '80s movies and the dudes doing all that hard training. My grandfather, who's just died 20 years ago, 21 years ago, born in Luxembourg. His father, he doesn't know who he was. He was born and didn't know who his dad was. His stepdad was a drunk, a Frenchman. So he comes to America and as a teenager went to school and went to work to pay the bills because his mom's husband, his stepfather, was a drunk piece of shit. He would ride his bicycle. I forgot, he told me once in my youth, I remember, I wish he was alive longer because when I was in my teens, I didn't think to ask him certain things. He died when I was about 22, but he would ride his bicycle to hard rubber rim. I remember him saying that, not an inflated bike tire, like 20 miles between two jobs after school. He'd go work one place and then he'd go work another to make enough money to take care of his brothers and sisters. Then dude goes off to the Navy and goes and fights in World War II, then comes home and works as a typesetter, as a printer, and saves his money. I think the most money he ever made was like $18 an hour, and died with over $1 million of cash. And he like just saved his money. And like my mom and my aunt and uncles, they went to private Catholic school and stuff. So he spent money on their education. They had food to eat. They went on vacation by car. They traveled everywhere in the United States, everywhere as children. They went to all the national parks, but they went in the station wagon. Anyway, my point, like I never heard him complain about any of that.
Yeah.
He'd complain about politics. He was a staunch liberal, and I think he was because the New Deal probably helped his family because they were poor, lived through the Depression. He lived through those times, and I think it was pretty easy to accept that. My point, I never heard him complain about that stuff. We just lost a family member, a German. His name was Alois Hastreiter, my nephew's great grandfather, and he was like a grandpa to me. He was right near 100. Fantastic dude. His wife, Martha Omi, was grandma. They both were into their 90s. He lived in Germany, was part of Hitler's youth, like as a kid. He was conscripted into the youth program. His house is still there, still owned by the family. There are still holes plastered up in this multi-hundred-year-old farmhouse in Bavaria where freaking artillery shells punched holes through the house. And he didn't complain about any of that shit. What he would, I remember, and I don't want to, I'm getting long-winded, but as you're talking about, this is what it makes me think of. Every time we'd eat meat, all the years I knew him, I met him when I was a teenager, and he just passed away in the last year. We'd eat meat. And if you sat near him, Like he'd bump you. And I go, what's up, Opa? And he'd say, when I was a boy, if you had this much meat, and he'd show you the end of his thumb, and he'd say, if you had this much meat, you saved it till the end of the meal. And then you'd eat the littlest bites of the meat and you would taste it and you'd hold it in your mouth as long as you could. And he was basically telling you they had nothing, and he's like, and now we have all this. He was a cabinet maker, one of the greatest craftsmen I've ever seen or known. He made beautiful marqueterie. Have you ever seen the artwork made with little tiny pieces of wood? That's what
Yes.
he made beautiful jewelry boxes, inlaid shit. Anyway, he's a cabinet maker. He owned multiple homes, was able to help his grandchildren buy houses, was able to help put grandchildren and great grandchildren through college. He worked his ass off. He was a tradesman. He wasn't a stockbroker. He wasn't a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer. He was a woodworker, but he worked his ass off. I never heard that dude complain about anything. He complained about lazy people. So, I think about the things you're talking about. And then on the flip side, like somebody could argue that things were different for them. They were different. Like shit was way more corrupt in a lot of ways in those days, and anybody could get away with it. You had a heart attack and you died. I just had a friend last week have a quadruple bypass, and he's home. I think stress did it to him. He's not fat, and he was a smoker, but like you died. You were 50 years old. You had a heart attack, and they found you in the lazy boy dead. Now you go, they and you're golden. So anyway, I just thinking of things you're saying. I think it's like what it's not just like this way or that. It's not a teeter totter. I kind of look at it like maybe a lens that you're looking through, and how are you tilting it? What do you see?
Well, I'm
What
so
do you
glad you
think of
said that,
that?
Mickey, because I love it, because these things that we're talking about, it's not black and white. And every issue that people fight about, they fight as if there's an easy solution, and there is no easy solution. Life, like Thomas Sowell says, life is about trade-offs, right? And there's two things you said that really stuck out. One was you're talking about his work ethic, and we're actually quite similar, because my maternal grandfather, he passed away when I was 22 as well, and I was very close to him. And he kind of redefined aging in the sense that everyone else would get old and kind of grumpy, and I'd be like, oh mom, I don't want to see this grumpy old relative. And she's like, Lawrence, people just get grumpy when they get old. And I'm like, yeah, but granddad's not. Granddad's the life of the party. He's the mayor of his small town. He's in his 90s. He's the man. He did the same thing. He had a work ethic from morning to night. He was just doing things, being productive. He had a pool outside in the south of France. He'd get a swim in. Then he would like grow his own vegetables. Then he would go to the town. He was the mayor of the town up until he died. Like he was just in this little medieval town. But the work ethic of those people back in the day was just insane, because they didn't really have leisure like that. Now you got people. What do they say? The number one career aspiration for the youth now is to be a social media influencer. And you got people like that's their job, is they're making a few videos, they're watching hours of Netflix, they're fucking around on their phone all day. They're just wasting time because they have the luxury of that. So I love that. I think so many people that it's good to be reminded of greatness. A lot of the time takes luck, of course, but it takes a lot of hard work and effort. And there's something about society, going back to easy times. It seems like a lot of people don't have the work ethic that the previous generations had. So I couldn't agree more. I think there is a pendulum in terms of, you mentioned health. I mean, I know Dan got some stem cells at CPI in Mexico. I went to Colombia last year and I got a bunch of stem cells. Like the medical advancements that we're living through is just incredible. It's remarkable. So you definitely, when you have that historic lens, I think it gives you much more peace. So talking about the politics, I remember having a debate with a friend of mine. I'm like, man, it seems really bad, huh? We don't know what the truth is. The left and the right are so divided. He said, well, historically, it's not too bad. We had a civil war. It's better now. So having that historic lens to look through things it gives us good perspective. But do you have some thoughts on the uptick in violent crime? It seems like, I mean, you're from the north of Chicago. I left Chicago. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like Chicago's known for people. I've got friends in London, and they're sending me articles about shootings in Chicago. There was 4 people that were shot in like at 1:30 right next to one of my job sites on the south side last year. And I'm like, man, I was just there. I was just there yesterday afternoon or whatever it was, and I was right there. So I tend to work in a lot of the developers are working kind of in between the really bad areas and the gentrifying areas. You make money by being on the border. So I'm in a lot of bad areas, and the people I talk to, most of the people there all want the same things. They're kind of stuck in that environment where the shootings all around them. And it's just so tragic because I did a podcast recently with a doctor who set up a foundation. I never even thought about this, but he set up a foundation for people who lose their kids through gun violence. So there was a young boy who was going to bed and a stray bullet went through his window and killed him. And his mom didn't, you need what, 10,000 for the burial. She didn't have the money for the burial. And he ended up paying for it. And they actually passed a law in Congress for this so they could get money quickly, because otherwise you only have a few days, then they have to get cremated. And he's saying now this woman has a place to go to heal. She can go to the gravesite, and it's made a difference in her life, like getting over that trauma of losing a kid. So the the violence seems bad, the numbers, and then when you look at it, I think they said something like there's a fifth of the deaths of gunshot wounds than there were a generation or two ago because of advancements in medical history. So you think, man, that must be a lot of people getting shot then, a lot of fatalities, because a lot of people are surviving the shootings. Like when you read those articles, holiday weekend, July 4th weekend in Chicago, there was 132 shootings. When I was young and I glanced over a headline, I'm like, oh, 132 people were killed. But no, it's 132 shootings and 16 fatalities or something. So that's a nice statistic that a lot of these people can't shoot. But I mean, it does seem like the like the lens you're looking through, like you mentioned, or I always look at politics like a pendulum. It seems to swing too far one way and then it kind of corrects the other way. So we seem to be in a state where the criminals almost have more rights than the innocent victims when it comes to violent crime.
I think that the ladder test comes to mind. You ever heard of the ladder test or talked about that? Somebody shared this with me once. When's the last time you saw a ladder? When's the last time you saw one in your garage, out and about? Just think about it. And you're like, I don't know.
Wow.
Well, now the next 24 hours, 48 hours, pay attention. I bet you'll notice ladders everywhere. You're going to see them behind Starbucks, bolted to the building. You're going to see them on the roof of a truck. You're going to see it in your garage. You're going to walk through the hardware store. You're going to, you're just going to, like, because it's this thing that's no reason to pay attention to, but now it's in your head. And so right now in the Midwest, there's a storm. Everybody's sharing about the storm, and thus we're focusing on the weather. And then we're talking about climate change. And then we're talking about, is there enough resources for snow removal? It is very easy to fixate on crime when you fixate on crime. And then it tends to be even of higher relevance, because the more you think about it, the more you see it. And then you start to add the way social media works and the way that search algorithm works. It's popping up in the feeds on your Instagram, Twitter, and all that crap over and over. I think that's part of it. The other thing, I mean, we talk about you brought up a bunch of really bad shit going on in the world. For as much as I love my friends in law enforcement, I think there does need to be a lot of changes in that arena. We have created this huge industrial prison complex. And I've been caught in it as a young man, even like traffic violations and stuff. The amount of crap that a person is subjected to because they got a traffic violation. And don't speed. And then you won't have that. I'm down with that. Or traffic light kind of things. The amount of crap that goes along with it, multiple court appearances, missing work. Again, don't speed. You probably won't have to deal with it. We've created business around government. Yes. So I think there's a problem with that. We have taken the incentive away from hard work through overtaxation, through making it very difficult to get ahead for a lot of people. So in that, it I think makes it hard for I don't want to say less fortunate, but I think the best way that I look at it is people with poor models. You were fortunate to have a good model of a father. There are tons of people that have no father or a shitty model of a father or a mother. And this is why I have a dear friend that was a fireman. His daughter went to the Navy and became an EMT. His son is now a firefighter, right? You hear about this stuff all the time. I have friends who are both school teachers. Their kids are in school to be school teachers. So a lot of times we follow the model. You're trying to set a good example for your son. You're making an effort to do that. Somebody posted something today of a young kid, I think it was in New York, follows an old woman. It's like a ring cam, catches it, follows her, or he's hiding. She sees him. She knows this dude's about to mug me, and he steals her purse and leaves. And somebody wrote in the comments, "Good Lord, help our kids." And I didn't comment. I just thought, lady, help your kid. It ain't God's problem that we've raised a bunch of children that rob old ladies. That said, you were talking about England, it being strange for firearm holders to have a handgun coming from England, coming from Britain. Our laws here in America, our very Second Amendment was based on Old English common law. Like that's what separated a member of the crown from the whole world, is they were men with arms. Like if you were an Englishman, you had a right to defend yourself with, and that was like the thing that made an Englishman. Like we're the only people on the planet that can have arms to defend ourselves and defend the realm. And now you guys have stripped yourselves of that. You decided, or England did, the UK decided that that's not good anymore. And culturally, we've allowed these things to shift. I think I've got friends that are coppers all over Chicagoland, and most of them are, anybody that's my friend is a good human. Most cops, I think, are trying to do the right thing, but I think many of them are also victims of the system. Just like a flight attendant that's pissed off at everybody not listening to them doing the pre-board speech. You just become a product of the thing you're in. And every once in a while you get that flight attendant that's a total badass, that's telling jokes, and you're like happy to listen to him. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Like these people shooting these towns up, Chicago being one of them, need to be caught and need to be tried by a jury and then sent to jail for a long, long time. I have a guy we're going to do a podcast with. He's over by Freeport, so west of Chicago. I think this is the first time I've talked about it in a podcast. It was a couple months ago. Just like you, he works from home. He's got a little boy, and his wife works from home, and they homeschool their kid. Every day at lunch, as the kid's eating lunch, dad takes a little 10-minute nap, kid eats his lunch, and then they get back to homeschooling. I think the kid's like 9. Dad lays down for a minute, and he hears his son screaming. 4 people broke the patio door open in broad daylight and came in to rob the house. Dad had been smart enough to pre-plan, if this ever happens, son, go to your bedroom, mom, go to the bedroom, call 911, dad will do whatever. So dad like posts up in a stairwell where they couldn't see him, got a gun, he's got his gun on him, and he tells them, get the fuck out of my house, I will shoot you. And they have like a 2-minute exchange of words. The guy's like, fuck you, we're coming in. And he's like, fuck you, I'm going to shoot you, get out of my house. And he eventually, whatever he told them, they decided it's not worth robbing this house. The wife had called 911. They picked these people up in the driveway. They were back on the street hours later. So these people broke, and they were armed. They broke into a home. Hours later, not even the next day, the same day, they're let back out. Like a month later, this guy gets picked up again, doing the same thing, breaking into a family's home. That is insane. Like when I was a teenager, I remember like, oh, did you hear Lawrence got caught shoplifting? Oh no, like he's in big trouble. Like they arrested him. You know what I'm talking about? You'd hear like something not to diminish shoplifting, but like, the guy stole a $20 thing from the store and it was a big deal. Now you
Yeah.
break into a home, four
Armed.
people. Yeah. And they let them back out. So we've got a real problem. And that is your and I problem because we keep letting we in Illinois, we let our piece of shit governor and we let our legislature pass this PICA Act, which this is happening all over the country, except and this had to do with what went on the last couple of years after George Floyd, where people said defund the police. Now, just in Compton the other day, I shared a video of like 100 people tore open a bakery, some little bakery like you or I would own in a neighborhood, destroyed a guy's business where he's probably going to have to close the doors, and people are blaming it on government. So then the citizens of Compton are saying, we got to do something. Well, yeah, you guys didn't want the police to do anything, and now you've got people just knowing I can go tear a store apart and nobody's going to do anything about it. So long-winded answer, but we the people have to take our government seriously.
Exactly. Elect better leaders, and especially the local governments. I think so many people fixate on the presidential race, and no one really talked about the power of the local government. And then COVID came, and you saw them. I remember when COVID first shut down everything in Chicago, it was midnight, and I went for a run with my puppy, and I'm running on the lakefront. Even COVID or no COVID, there's no one out at that time. I was South Loop, south side of the city. There's no one running there. And I bump into these four cops and they stop me and they're like, sorry, the lakefront's closed. And I talked to them for 2 seconds. And they were like, buddy, we don't care. Keep going. We're not going to do anything. We're just letting you know we're doing our job. It's ridiculous. But you realize that the rules come in and they can stop someone running on a lake path when there's no one in sight. They're just so silly. And one thing that I really love about America that we don't have, I didn't have in Europe, is the sense of the Second Amendment. You're armed to protect yourself against bad government. And that feeling of I think a lot of Europe is much more compliant. And if they had kept the US locked down for too much longer, I mean, the people were basically taking matters into their own hands, right? They were just not putting up for it anymore. So that sense of American freedom is something that I've really embraced. And I really don't take it for granted, because a lot of countries are just so compliant. My friend was in Spain, and he was stuck in a 500 square foot apartment with a dog. And he said, I would take the dog out and they would watch me and they would give me like 1 minute and then they're like, get back in. Like, it was just crazy strict. So I think that we should be very grateful. Yeah, we should be very grateful for that sense of freedom. And anyone listening, it's one thing to complain about politics. It's another one to put the effort in to vote for better leadership. Or like I know you've done, I've listened to you on other shows talk about, running for politics and trying to make a difference. And I think that's so inspiring is we have to take it seriously if we want a better world for our grandkids.
Agreed. You have a podcast.
Yes, you're going to be on very soon, and I'm going to ask you all the things
What's that podcast about? What made you start a podcast?
Honestly, Mickey, it was I got so much out of podcasts. A lot of podcasts are almost like a short audiobook, and there's so many. I feel like I have such a good network of people through the 3 different careers I've had, finance, real estate, entrepreneurship, and then all the combat sports. There's just so many interesting people that I want to talk to, because I was listening to these podcasts and I'm like, man, there's so many things that if I want to ask this guy, I want to find out. So it's been awesome. It's been so great because, you get to connect. I get to connect with people like you. And there's so many people that are like, Lawrence, you have to talk to this person. And then I'll talk to them and I'm like, man, that was incredible. So it's like, I appreciate that I had a good network, but what I really had is a good network of my networks. And I don't know about you, Mickey, but I've got so much out of it just in terms of just self-education. I've just learned so much, and I've been exposed to so many different viewpoints, and it makes you reanalyze the way you think things. And honestly, if it was nothing else other than you and me having a nice conversation where we're not distracted by a cell phone, that would be worth it for me, and all the other benefits for me are just like the cherry on top.
What is it called?
Enter the Lionheart, which is a play on my MMA nickname, Lionheart. And we'll definitely do one, because I do want to ask you all about a lot more into depth about your background and the shooting, because that's something that I'm so passionate about.
So is that like Enter the Dragon?
exactly a play on Enter the Dragon, and then my fighting nickname Lionheart.
So why'd they call you Lionheart? Like
So it
because you're
was, I think,
British?
because
Like,
that partly because of the British Richard the Lionheart, but it was my second MMA fight, and I fought this real tough wrestler. And the first 10 seconds, he throws a left hook and he misses me. But the seam of the glove, because when you fight, they always give you brand new gloves. They're kind of stiff. The seam of the glove just cut the bridge of my nose. And then it was a back and forth war, just a bloody mess. And so I came out of the cage, and my jiu-jitsu instructor, shout out Jay, he's like, brother, you are Larry the Lionheart. And then the next fight I had, a bunch of my friends got t-shirts with Lionheart on. It's stuck. So that was kind of
that's
cool.
a good
Because
name.
I really like it, Mickey, because we all have physical and mental attributes, but the heart we have to fight is something that we can control. And you have people, I think I beat boxers and MMA fighters who maybe were more physically talented than me, but I had that never die attitude where I'm like, you either have to knock me out, or we're gonna go to the decision, but I'll never ever quit. And I think I developed it going full circle back to those boxing days, is when I would just do, 10, 12 rounds of sparring with rotating partners. And I nearly died doing it, but I didn't show anything. That developed that kind of mental toughness. And because you have to have, obviously, the physical, you have to have the cardio. You can't fake cardio, but your mind can take you to places during the cardio that I think other people wouldn't go to. And I remember doing something like, I remember doing when I did a sub 130 half marathon for a guy that weighs 190 pounds and is a non-runner. That's actually,
Wow.
really good. I couldn't come close to that now. But I remember the last 3 miles thinking, man, my MMA buddies have no idea what real pain is like. This is pain, because I could really take myself to those kind of real dark pain places where everything hurts, but you just keep going.
What kind of mile pace is that?
I think it's a six something, like a 650 or something.
Kind of what I thought.
Um,
Okay, that's cranking.
but yeah, that was a good one. I did that twice. Um, but it's yeah, I think there's something that the podcast, the nickname, it's that part of me, it's over the combat sports aspect of it. But I have this tendency in my life, Mickey, to when I finish a chapter, like the when I had my trading business and I just gave it to one of my star trader, I'm like, you can have it, and he kept going and made a good amount of money, and I just let it go. And then the same when I finished fighting, I'm like, okay, I've got to restart a new career. Forget that was a past life. I have a tendency just to shut the door on things. But now I don't know if it's because I'm just a bit older. I've been really reflecting on just all the good times. But when you restart a career, or say you're teaching a course with some students, it's everything you've done in your life is you can put forward, and you've got the wisdom and lessons from it. And I've really been reflecting on all the carryover and the themes of resiliency and mindset and all these things. There's actually quite a lot of carryover between real estate, combat sports, and trading. And who would have thought it? But there's a
Hmm.
lot of themes. And I think when you find those themes in life, that's truth, right? I've got a really good friend. He says where there's overlap, there's truth. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Oh, I like that. Where there's overlap, there's truth. Who's that?
Oh, you know what? That's the same guy, Nick Gregorati. He's my jiu-jitsu friend. He's a
That's
he's a real
kind of
philosopher.
smart. He's got all the
He's
same.
he's awesome. I'm gonna get you connected. He's had a few different podcasts, and he's taking a bit of a break from it. He's working on some screenwriting, and I think he might have been a bit burnt out, but I'll get you guys connected, because he was on my first episode, and he was on episode number 100. He's a really, really great guy. I think you guys would hit it off.
You're going to be episode like 230, I think, for us.
Brother, you're an OG. You've done twice as many as me.
I don't know
But
if that
it's
makes
so
me OG, but yeah.
it's a lot. Well, there's some statistic where if you get past 10 episodes, you're in the top like 80%. Most people start and quit before doing 10. But then if you get over 50, you're in the top couple of percent. So when you get in the hundreds, you've definitely been doing, because people don't realize it's more work than people think. And I think they think they're going to do it, and then they're going to become a millionaire from it. Or I think their expectations are wildly unrealistic. So I think if you do want to start a podcast, try to just think about doing it because you want to have good conversations with interesting people, and anything else you get is a plus. But I've had some crazy stories. There's something I can't talk about yet, but I'm going to tell you off air, because it is a fascinating story. It's all going to come out. They're doing a documentary about two people that met through the one guy heard the other guy who was my guest on one of my podcasts. So it's just so
Oh,
cool.
that's cool.
Um, Yeah, and then another friend of mine, he met a girl who was a past podcast guest through he saw her on the heard her on the podcast, and now they're dating. So there's these cool little coincidences in life. You know, you have a conversation, you put it out there, you forget about it, and but you don't realize that it can really impact someone profoundly. And I've got some things like I only found out about stem cell surgery through listening to people talk about the results of theirs. You know, there's so many things that I've learned myself through listening to podcasts. So it's such a powerful medium, and I think it's so cool for posterity too. Like I said, I'm going to work on my dad because I mean he those stories from that 2 years alone are just incredible, and I want to know them myself. Selfishly, you know, I want my son to hear them. So
That's one of the main motivators that I've had in doing this is I have tried to interview as many people that are influential in my life. We've done a lot of stuff with you met Brian and Tasha while in Costa Rica. Uh,
yes,
both of them super professional people, awesome people, but they both have super cool stories that because of their careers and what they do for a living, they have no reason for anybody to know those stories. You know,
mm,
they're not interacting like this in their daily life. And it was like, man, your stories are pretty awesome. Like, I want to tell these stories to people, which to me is probably the thing I get the most from it. The second thing is guys like your dad that there's a bunch of like older dudes in my space that kind of like were a big thing before everybody had cell phones and stuff, and now you have to like read a book to know who they are.
yes,
Guys that were mentors to me, I tried to interview as many of them as possible, and there's some of them the only interview of them alive, some of them are gone now, is ones that I've talked them into. So you know
mm.
that I take a lot of pride in being able to do that, sharing those kinds of stories. I think with your dad that'd be pretty cool.
Well, Mickey, I'm
I
so glad you said that because I've of those episodes, three of the people that I got to talk to are no longer around, and it's a piece of their legacy. And one of them died in a tragic accident. He was young; he was in his late 30s, larger than life figure. He was a personal trainer in insane shape, just real charismatic, and he had so many friends that looked up to him and loved him. And I still did that was about a year and a half ago, and I still get messages, you know, to this day all the time from his friends, and they're just like, "Man, I just re-listened to you guys talking because I miss him." And it just brings me peace and thank you so much. And it's just it's so tragic, but it's really beautiful that at least we have that out there, because like you said, the older generation right now, people are documenting everything, you know, taking pictures of every meal they eat and everything. They can't take 2 steps without taking a photo. But when we were growing up, you didn't have anything. When I won the Golden Gloves, I have like some crappy picture of me and my coach at the time after, you know, that the following year they started having professional photography and all this stuff. Like we kind of we're a bit late in the game for right now with so people of older than us, they have almost no documentation. So I think that's really, really cool that you get to do that. It's like archiving history in your field, which is so cool.
Yeah, I dig it. I appreciate that you took the time, man, to talk with us. I'm interested to do some training with you. I want to hear more about some of the other uh, stuff that I know has been big parts of your life that we didn't get into. We're going to have you on again and dig into some of those things. As I kind of bring podcasts to a close, I always ask people if you never met the people that listened to you today, if you never got to visit with them, how would you or what would you leave them with?
I'm going to leave you with something that kind of blew my mind, Mickey. There's a book that I read when I was 24, and it's by the psychologist Martin Seligman, and it's called Authentic Happiness. And he basically launched this brand of positive psychology. And he said, you know, traditional psychology is you get someone that's a complete mess and you want to bring them to normal. But he said, what happens if we get a whole branch where we try and take normal people and we get them to an exceptional, thriving level of life? And so he launched this movement, and that's when you see a lot of famous authors quoted in podcasts that talk about positive psychology. He was one of the founders of that movement. And yeah, in the book he talked about the secret to a good life is trying to figure out what your signature strengths are, things that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and try and build them into the fabric of your life. So when I took the test at 24, there were things like one of them was curiosity, love of learning. Another one was discipline and drive. I can't remember the others, but they were along that theme, which makes sense. I was a 24-year-old. I was trying to prove myself in the financial career. I was an amateur boxer at the time. And I thought the other day, I'm like, man, I want to redo the test, and see what it is. Now I'm 20 years later. And I took it, and I was blown away because the number one thing that came up, my signature strength, Mickey, was love. And I was like, Jesus, what have I become? A hippie? Like this is crazy. I was blown away. And of the top 5, none of them overlap, except the only one was curiosity. I still have a lot of curiosity. And so I'm gonna leave people with that, is every time you come to a decision, a lot of the time you make the decision from 2 positions. One is of fear and one is of love. And I think going through life, trying to make as many decisions as you can through love is, I know I'm sounding kind of new agey and hippie, but it's something that's just come to me now in my 40s, is I don't want to go through my life linking my happiness to achieving something, ticking a box, winning a fight, getting some deal closed. Like, I don't want my happiness tied up to these external events. I just want to be happy because, brother, we're not getting any younger, and seeing my son growing so quickly, and man, life is flying by. So is try to just is appreciate where you're at, because have the confidence that you're going to strive to greatness, or you're going to strive to create the life you want, but appreciate where you at right in life right now, and just have love for yourself and spread love to others, because it's been such a profound realization. I just had it this summer. I remember thinking, Jesus, my whole life I've gone through, if I can just get through the next 6 weeks of this training camp and win this fight, I'm going to be happy. Or if I can just get my black belt in jiu-jitsu, if I can just pay off this credit card and I can buy this thing for my wife. Like, no, just be happy now, like, it's because otherwise you're going to go through your whole life, whether you tick the boxes or not, it's going to be too late. What, you're going to be happy on your deathbed because you ticked every box? That's a horrible way to go through life. So I've really just, sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but just spread the love, brother. And I feel it for you, Mickey. I'm so glad we met. Dan, shout out to Dan Hart. He's such a great guy. He introduced us. He said, "You got to meet Mickey. You're gonna love him." And we had that last dinner, and you were just busting my balls the whole time. And I'm like, I love this guy. So I'm so grateful we met. We'll do part 2 anytime, and we'll do
I'm glad
one
we
on my
met
podcast
too.
too.
I'm glad
So
we
I
met
appreciate
too.
you, brother.
How do people find you? They go to Lauren. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm easy to find. Lawrence Dunning on Instagram, and then Enter the Lionheart on iTunes or Spotify. I'm easy to find. I'm out there, and I'm just trying to put love and interesting conversations like the one we're gonna have, and hopefully in a few weeks. Just trying to put it out there in the universe and spread good energy.
I love it. You guys that viewed, if you dug the conversation, thanks for tuning in, listening, viewing, however you've consumed this content. Share it. If you got a comment that's not some asshole statement, put it below. If you've got a question, put it below. Send an email if you need to over to training@carrytrainer.com, or you can find Lawrence on his social media and send him a comment or question. I'm sure he'll work hard to respond. Be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them. Drink good coffee like the Ignis Lux, made with love. Kind of like, that's actually our motto, made with love, Lawrence. So I kind of fits with what you said. Bye now.
Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com. Oh, that's so nice and toasty. Chilly winter day. Hey, want to make sure that you guys know that this episode of the Higher Line podcast has been brought to you by Ignis Lux Coffee. Ignis Lux, Latin for firelight. A reminder to let your fire burn bright. We are only here but for a little while, and there's no sense in drinking crummy coffee when there's coffee like this available. Small batch roasted in fluid bed roasters. Check that out. Less than 1% of all the coffee in the world is done in fluid bed roasters. Why? Because it's more work, but it gives you a much better product. IgnisLuxCoffee.com. Roasted fresh, sent right to your door. Check it out.